Hi guys. I made a paid service in Telegram where you will find a great collection of fanfiction audiobooks organized and regularly updated. What you get? An unlimited access to the full audiobook library. New fanfiction audiobooks added regularly. You can play audios directly from Telegram anytime. Joining our service is available through a monthly subscription of $5. You can pay using PayPal or Ko-fi. So what are you waiting for? Send me a message on Telegram or Discord. I will provide the payment details. After the payment is confirmed, you will receive access to the private Telegram channel containing all audiobooks. If you enjoy fanfiction and prefer listening instead of reading, this library is made for you. Message me anytime to join.
51, Chapter 51, Raven Shopping, 1. Back at Nevermore, Enid lay sprawled on her bed, staring up at the ceiling as if it might offer answers. Tomorrow was Raven, and Ethan was still in a cellar at least. That's what her mind kept insisting. The point was, he wasn't here. Which meant her carefully imagined Raven plans were quietly collapsing. She sighed and rolled onto her side, hugging a pillow. So who was she supposed to go with? The thought of asking someone else made her stomach twist. She didn't have the energy, or the mood. Her thoughts drifted, reluctantly but inevitably, to Wednesday. Going with Wednesday would be weird. Very weird. No dancing, no smiling photos, probably a lot of judging stares and morbid commentary. But also, better than going alone. Enid groaned softly and buried her face in the pillow. Okay, she told herself. Worst case, we stand in a corner together and silently hate everyone. Honestly, that didn't sound that terrible. Decision half made, Enid rolled onto her back again, staring at the ceiling. She finally sat up, turning her head toward Wednesday. Wednesday was seated at her desk, flipping through a stack of photos with focused precision, her attention entirely on whatever mystery currently occupied her mind. Without looking up, Wednesday spoke. What? Enid hesitated, shifting on the bed. Wednesday turned a page. Spit it out. Enid took a breath, bracing herself. Would you mind going to Raven with me? Enid asked. Wednesday turned slowly, deliberately, as if each degree of movement were a judgment. Aren't you going with Ethan? She asked. Enid scoffed. Are you serious? You know what situation he's in. Wednesday's gaze narrowed slightly. He said he'd return today. But he didn't, Enid said, quieter now. And I don't want to go alone. Silence. Wednesday looked at her for a long moment, not sympathetically, not warmly, but with the detached consideration she usually reserved for puzzles and corpses. Raven is pointless, Wednesday said at last. It's loud, crowded, and built on forced social performance. Enid's shoulders drooped. So no. Wednesday flipped one last photo, stacked the pile neatly, and finally stood. I didn't say no, she said. I said it's unpleasant. She met Enid's eyes again. If the alternative is you spiraling for the next 24 hours, I suppose Raven is the lesser evil. Enid blinked, then smiled. So that's a yes. Don't read into it, Wednesday said coolly. I'm only doing this because I don't want you moping around the room and disturbing my investigation. That was all the permission Enid needed. She jumped off the bed and wrapped her arms around Wednesday, hugging her tightly where she sat. Thank you, Enid said, voice bright and breathless. Wednesday stiffened immediately. You have 5 seconds. Enid pulled back just enough to grin at her. She didn't miss the point. Wednesday hated crowds, hated dances, hated everything Raven represented. And yet she was going anyway. For her, that mattered. Enid smiled softly, a little more restrained this time. Whatever Wednesday wanted to call efficiency, damage control, inconvenience, Enid knew better. In Wednesday's own way, this was friendship. So you're not going with me? A voice said lightly. I'm hurt. Enid froze. Okay, am I the only one hearing that? No, Wednesday replied calmly. It's coming from the balcony. Enid crossed the room and pushed open the large circular window. Ethan stood on the stone balcony, one hand resting against the cold stone. So, he said lightly, I take it you aren't going with me. Before Wednesday could respond, Enid rushed forward and wrapped her arms around him. While you're real, Enid said, pulling back just enough to look at him. You're released. Yes, Ethan replied calmly. Didn't I say the charges were useless from the start? Enid let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. I was so worried. Wednesday watched the exchange in silence, her expression unreadable. Now that I'm released, Ethan said lightly, let's go Raven shopping. Since you've secured your Raven date, Wednesday replied, already reaching for her notebook, I'll continue my investigation. Ethan looked at her for a beat, then smiled. He leaned in and murmured something to Enid. Enid's eyes flicked to Wednesday. She nodded once. They both turned to face her. I don't like the way you're looking at me, Wednesday said. That was all the warning she got. Ethan took one arm. Enid took the other. You're coming with us, Ethan said. You need something appropriate to wear. Yes, Enid added, tugging gently. We're doing friend shopping. It's happening. Wednesday stared at them, unimpressed. This is coercion. Temporary, Ethan said. And necessary, Enid chimed in. Like that, Wednesday was dragged along between Ethan and Enid. She definitely didn't look pleased, but she also wasn't given a chance to protest. They moved too quickly, too decisively, as if they'd anticipated every possible objection. As they reached the corridor, Ethan glanced back. Thing had just emerged from the shadows, fingers flexing inquisitively. Thing, Ethan said, over his shoulder, follow us. Thing paused, then gave a quick affirmative gesture before scuttling after them. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 77, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 52, Chapter 52, Raven Shopping, 2. Like that, the trio ended up in Jericho, standing under harsh lights and surrounded by racks of Raven-ready clothes. Enid was in her element. She darted between hangers with barely contained excitement, emerging every few minutes in a new dress, spinning once, striking a pose, waiting for judgment. Ethan leaned back against a display, giving an enthusiastic thumbs up every single time. That one's great. Pause. So is that one. Another pause. Honestly, all of them work. Enid beamed, disappearing back into the fitting room again. Wednesday, meanwhile, stood perfectly still near the entrance, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. The colors assaulted her from every direction: pastels, sequins, glitter, fabrics that shimmered aggressively under the lights. She looked like she was enduring a hostile environment. I can feel my skin peeling just by standing here, Wednesday said flatly. Ethan glanced at her. That's probably the joy. It's synthetic, she replied, and deeply offensive. Enid popped out again, grinning. Okay, but what about this one? Wednesday looked at the dress for half a second. It's loud. It doesn't make noise, Enid said. It does to me. She turned slightly, as if shielding herself from another rack of neon fabric. Wednesday, why do you hate colors? Enid asked, genuinely curious. I'm allergic to color, Wednesday replied without hesitation. How allergic? Enid asked. Wednesday glanced at a rack of aggressively bright dresses, then back at Enid. Prolonged exposure causes my skin to peel. Enid didn't seem to believe her, but Ethan was sure Wednesday really did have that allergy. He had seen it himself in season 2, when Enid and Wednesday swapped bodies. Wednesday's skin had turned red the moment she wore colorful clothes. He glanced down at Thing, who had perched himself atop a clothing stand, fingers flexing idly. Thing, Ethan said, follow me. Thing immediately leapt down and climbed onto Ethan's shoulder, settling there like it belonged. Ethan looked back at the two girls. You continue shopping. I'll be back in 5 minutes. Before either of them could ask where he was going or who, he turned and stepped out of the shop, Thing riding along. As they stepped outside the store, the door closing behind them, Ethan glanced down at Thing. Hey, Thing, he asked quietly, do you want Wednesday to actually enjoy Raven? Thing paused, fingers hovering. Then he signed yes, followed immediately by another sharp set of gestures. She won't agree. Social events and Wednesday Addams were fundamentally incompatible. Ethan nodded, unsurprised. He already knew that if they asked Wednesday to buy a dress, she'd reject the idea outright. If they tried to force her, she'd dismantle the plan and possibly theme out of spite. I know, Ethan said. That's why it has to be a surprise. So are you in? Thing hesitated for a second, then gave a firm nod. They stopped in front of Uriah's Heap, the antique shop tucked between modern storefronts like it had been forgotten on purpose. Behind the glass display hung a single frilly black dress, simple, severe, and unmistakably striking. Ethan studied it for a moment. So, he asked, do you think Wednesday would like this dress? He was already certain she would. It was the same dress Wednesday had worn to Raven. One Thing had stolen from here in the first place. Dark, elegant, and mercifully free of color. Thing leaned closer to the window, examined it, then nodded. His fingers moved decisively, signing that she would definitely like it. Ethan smiled. Good. He reached for the door. Then let's go get it. The bell chimed softly as he stepped inside. The shop owner was almost vibrating with enthusiasm as soon as Ethan showed interest. Uriah's Heap thrived on rarity, and the moment the owner realized the dress had a buyer, the sales pitch became Reverend Tight's age, its stitching, its history all recited like a ritual. The price was steep. Antique. One of a kind. Ethan didn't blink. To him, it was insignificant. As the owner carefully folded the dress and wrapped it in layers of tissue, Thing wandered off, his attention caught by a glass case near the counter. Inside sat an antique manicure kit with dark shades, the small bottles arranged neatly. Ethan noticed immediately. You like it? He asked. Thing tapped the glass once, then signed. Enthusiastically. The colors, the precision, the tiny brushes. It was perfect. He even mimed painting a nail with exaggerated care. Ethan smiled. Yeah, that tracks. He turned back to the owner. We'll take that too. The owner didn't even question it, already reaching for the case. Excellent choice. That set's very popular with discerning customers. Thing watched closely as the polish was wrapped, fingers flexing with approval. Dress secured. Thing hopped back onto Ethan's shoulder, fingers signing a hesitant question. Can I really have it? Ethan glanced at him and smiled. Of course. We're practically family. Thing froze. Family? His fingers moved again, sharp and curious. Ethan shrugged lightly. Well, if I marry Wednesday, wouldn't that make us family? Thing stared at him for a long second. Then slowly he relaxed. Relief crossed his expressive little hand in a way that needed no translation. Someone who could handle Wednesday. Someone who didn't flinch, didn't cower, didn't try to soften her edges. Thing patted Ethan's shoulder once, approving. Ethan chuckled. Yeah, I figured you'd get it. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 78, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 53, Chapter 53, Raven, 1. Like that, the day of Raven arrived. Inside the hall reserved for the dance, Nevermore had transformed itself beyond recognition. The high ceilings were washed in shifting lights, colors sliding across dark stone walls that had never been meant to host anything so loud. Disco lights spun slowly overhead, scattering reflections across the floor. Music thumped through the room, heavy and constant, vibrating through the air. A long table along one side held bowls of blue-colored punch, surrounded by students already laughing too loudly. Everyone was smiling as they arrived, paired off and dressed for the occasion, greeted at the entrance by Marilyn Thornhill. She wore a pristine white dress, the fabric bright against the darker tones of the hall. Her right hand was still in a cast, but it didn't seem to dampen her enthusiasm in the slightest. She welcomed each couple warmly, smiling as she guided them inside, her voice light and pleasant. It was an easy smile, open, almost comforting, so convincing, in fact, that no one would ever guess what lay beneath it, that the same woman greeting them so cheerfully harbored a deep, festering hatred for outcasts. That behind the kindness was something far more calculated, far more dangerous. To anyone watching, she was just a teacher enjoying the dance. And that, perhaps, was the most unsettling part. In Ophelia Hall, Enid stood near the mirror in her raven dress, smoothing the fabric for the third time, her reflection practically vibrating with excitement. Across the room, Wednesday sat at her desk in her usual black attire, shoulders rigid, fingers striking the keys of her typewriter with precise, merciless rhythm. Clack, clack, clack. Thing rested beside the machine, tapping 2 fingers against the wood, as if counting down to something only he understood. Enid glanced over at them again, smiling a little too brightly. I can see you and Thing seem to be planning something behind my back, Wednesday said without looking up, her eyes never leaving the page. Enid stiffened. Knew we didn't, did we, Thing? She asked quickly. Thing froze mid-tap. After a beat, he signed nothing at all, his fingers lifting in an exaggerated display of innocence. The typing stopped. Wednesday slowly turned in her chair to face them. Her dark eyes moved from Enid's overly cheerful expression to Thing's suspicious stillness. You're both terrible liars, she said flatly. Enid, you smile when you're excited. Thing, you stop moving when you're guilty. Thing made a small, offended gesture. Wednesday folded her hands. Whatever you're hiding is written all over your faces. I suggest you tell me no before I'm forced to uncover it myself. You see, Enid began, twisting a strand of hair around her finger. Thing, and I planned for you to actually enjoy Raven. Wednesday's eyebrow lifted a fraction. You should know how much I despise social events, Wednesday said coolly. They're loud, inefficient, and full of people pretending to enjoy themselves. And why am I involved in this? Don't you already have a date with Ethan? Why bother dragging me into it? Enid's smile didn't falter. Of course we're going together to Raven. We. Yes, Enid said brightly. 3 of us. Wednesday clarified. You, Ethan, and me. Thing flashed an enthusiastic thumbs up. Wednesday stared at them for a long, unblinking moment. Have you both lost your minds? She asked. Enid winced slightly but pushed on. Come on, Wednesday. It's Raven. You have to be there. And you'll be miserable if you don't go. I'm miserable with people, Wednesday corrected. That's why it's perfect. Enid insisted. Wednesday glanced at Thing. You helped her come up with this. Thing signed for your own good. Wednesday exhaled slowly, clearly reconsidering several methods of murder. This, she said at last, is the most elaborate ambush I've experienced all week. So are you coming? Enid asked softly. Please. If it had been anyone else, Enid would have already said no to sharing Raven night with Ethan. But this was Wednesday. Somehow, that made it different. Acceptable. Even comforting. Before Wednesday could respond, Thing scurried over to the wardrobe and tugged the door open with dramatic flair. From inside, he carefully pulled out a black frilled dress, antique, elegant, and unmistakably severe. The fabric looked like it belonged to another century. The dress Ethan and Thing had found at the antique store. Wednesday's gaze locked onto it instantly. She rose from her chair and took the dress from Thing's hands, fingers brushing over the material as if assessing its history. A small smile barely there, but real tugged at the corner of her lips. Where did you get this? Wednesday asked, her tone calm but curious. Thing straightened proudly and signed. I got some help. Wednesday glanced at him, then back at the dress. Of course you did. She held it up once more, inspecting the frills, the cut, the darkness of the fabric. At least you understand my aesthetic. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 81, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 54, chapter 54, Raven, 2. Ethan arrived to pick them up dressed in a black suit. It was sharply tailored, understated, and unmistakably deliberate. White was the expected choice for Raven. Almost everyone wore it. Ethan hadn't even considered it. White washed him out, made him look theatrical like a parody of the event itself. Black, on the other hand, suited him. He knocked on the door and waited. A second later, the door opened. Wednesday stood in the doorway. She was wearing the black frilled dress he'd bought, same one from Uriah's heap. The dark fabric fell perfectly into place, sharp and deliberate, like it had always belonged to her. For a brief moment, Ethan forgot to speak. Wednesday's eyes flicked over him, just as critical, just as unreadable. Wow, you look, Ethan began, the words catching before he could stop them. In that dress, Wednesday was beautiful, unmistakably so, in a way that unsettled him. Unrecognizable. Wednesday supplied coolly. Ridiculous. A classic example of female objectification for the male gaze. None of the above, Ethan said. You look beautiful. You'd be even more dangerous if you smiled. Enid popped up behind her and looped her arm through Wednesday's. Okay, what about me? Enid asked brightly. How do I look? Ethan didn't hesitate, he gave a firm thumbs up. You look amazing. Enid beamed. Ethan glanced between them, a hint of amusement in his voice. I must have done something incredibly virtuous in a past life to end up escorting 2 beautiful girls tonight. Wednesday turned her head just enough to look at him. Flattery won't save you. He smiled. Worth trying. Enid squeezed Wednesday's arm. Come on, let's go before the music gets louder. At the entrance to Raven, Ethan arrived with Wednesday and Enid on each side, both holding onto his arms as if this arrangement were the most natural thing in the world. Principal Weems stood by the doors, welcoming students with her usual composed authority. She looked up and paused. In all her years at Nevermore, she had never seen this. Not Wednesday Addams. Not like this. Certainly not arriving with a boy, and definitely not with 2 dates. Still, her expression smoothed out instantly. Good evening, Weems said, her tone perfectly measured as they approached. Her eyes flicked briefly to Wednesday, then to Enid, then to Ethan. I trust you'll enjoy Raven. Wednesday inclined her head slightly. That seems unlikely. Enid smiled brightly. We'll try. Ethan gave a polite nod. We intend to. Weems held their gaze for a second longer, as if committing the sight to memory. Do remember, she added, Raven is about community. Participation. Letting go. Wednesday's lips twitched. I'll keep that in mind. They passed her and entered the hall, the music swelling around them. Weems watched them go, her brow creasing just slightly. She had encouraged Ethan to enjoy campus life. She just hadn't anticipated this. How, exactly, had Ethan managed to convince both girls to agree to this arrangement together? Enid's enthusiasm she could understand, but Wednesday Addams? That defied every precedent. As they stepped into Raven, the reaction was immediate. Heads turned. Conversations stalled. A few students openly stared. A boy arriving with 2 dates was rare enough. That both of them were beautiful was enough to make some boys jealous. The contrast in their clothes only made it worse. Ethan in black, Wednesday in an even darker black, Enid bright and radiant between them. Together, they were impossible to ignore, their presence alone drawing every gaze in the room. Whispers rippled. Is Wednesday actually with him? And Enid too? Enid squeezed Ethan's arm, eyes wide. Okay, wow. People are staring. They usually do when something unnatural occurs, Wednesday replied calmly. Ethan glanced around, unfazed. Relax. They'll get bored. They didn't. Across the room, Xavier stood near the edge of the dance floor, watching them enter. His smile faded almost instantly. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered. Ajax followed his line of sight. Is Wednesday with him? Xavier didn't respond. His gaze remained fixed on Wednesday, irritation simmering just beneath the surface. He had meant to ask her to Raven, had come close more than once, but the certainty of rejection had stopped him every time. Now, seeing her like this, the regret settled with uncomfortable weight. Bianca noticed the look immediately and let out a quiet sigh. His date stood right beside him, yet his attention was elsewhere. If this was how the night began, Raven was already drifting toward disaster. Meanwhile, the trio moved further inside. The music thumped, lights flashed, and the room buzzed with energy that Wednesday had no intention of matching. This place smells like artificial happiness, she said. Enid laughed. It's a dance, Wednesday. Yes, Wednesday replied. That's the problem. 55, Chapter 55, I was human. I regret my decision to come here, Wednesday said flatly, standing beside Enid as she registered the weight of too many eyes on her. Enid, on the other hand, looked delighted. She glanced around at the stares, the whispers, the double takes. No, we totally nailed Raven, Enid said brightly. Everyone's looking at us. Well, you two are pretty eye-catching, Ethan said as he returned with 2 cups of punch, handing them over. Of course they're staring. So what do they do at Raven? Wednesday asked, taking the cup but not drinking, besides standing around, talking, and awkwardly dancing. We talk, Enid said simply. About what? Wednesday replied. You already talk constantly. Why require music and flashing lights for it? Enid shrugged. About feelings. Ethan nodded once. Then let me be honest about mine. I'm happy you both came with me tonight. Wednesday's gaze sharpened. Before you start celebrating, explain something. He waited. Why did you want to attend Raven with 2 girls? She asked coolly. I may dislike this event, but I'm not ignorant of what asking someone to a dance implies. It implied feelings toward the person invited. In his case, there were two, and that was the problem. Ethan considered her for a moment. I knew you'd ask. But my intentions haven't exactly been a secret. They've evolved, Wednesday replied. Previously, they were ambiguous. Now they're explicit. She tilted her head, studying him like a specimen. You intend to pursue a relationship with both of us. Simultaneously. Do you believe we're living in medieval times? Enid, instead of looking shocked, looked merely thoughtful. That caught Wednesday's attention. She turned slowly toward her roommate. You knew. There was a flicker of genuine surprise in her voice, brief, but real. She hadn't expected Enid to see through anything, let alone this. He kind of explained it, Enid said, when I asked him to Raven. Wednesday stared at her. You mean he openly admitted he was a scumbag who wanted to two-time? Enid shook her head quickly. No, he didn't say it like that. Her voice softened as she remembered how he'd spoken, calm and earnest, promising care, attention, devotion. Princess-level devotion. The memory made her expression drift, unfocused. Wednesday saw it instantly. That look. She'd seen it all her life on her mother's face whenever her father entered a room. Complete, irrational affection. The kind that disabled critical thinking. Wednesday exhaled. I don't know what you said to her, she said to Ethan, but she's a lost cause. Aren't you as well? Ethan said quietly. You're always very clear about how little you care for social events, yet here you are. And not by accident. You came knowing it was me. He smiled. That means something, even if you refuse to name it. If this were the Wednesday I met on the first day of school, Ethan continued, she wouldn't have come. She would have dismissed the idea entirely. Wednesday didn't respond immediately. I want to disagree. But my fixation on him, what he is, why he unsettles me, has crossed into unfamiliar territory. That realization irritated her deeply. She broke eye contact first. Correlation is not causation, Wednesday said coolly. Do not confuse. A/N, she means that seeing two things together doesn't automatically mean one caused the other. Ethan's smile didn't fade. Of course, he said. I wouldn't dare. But the way he said it suggested he already had. You should know, Ethan added, voice lower now, feelings are like water. The more you try to bottle them, the more pressure they build. Eventually, they find a way out. Sometimes they burst. Wednesday's expression didn't change. Human emotions worked exactly like that, messy, persistent, inconvenient. She had always treated them as variables to be controlled or ignored. Yet even she wasn't immune, no matter how often she claimed indifference. Ethan stepped closer, not enough to touch, but enough that his voice would carry only to her. He leaned toward her face, then angled slightly, his words brushing her ear. There's one secret I haven't told you, he said quietly. You already know I'm not a usual vampire, Ethan continued. But what you don't know is this. He paused, just long enough to ensure her attention. For months ago, I was human. Then he pulled back, a faint smile on his lips as if he'd just stated something trivial. Wednesday didn't move. Her eyes widened just slightly enough to betray what those words implied. Outcasts were born, not made. That was one of the few absolutes she trusted. Vampires, werewolves, sirens, every lineage traced itself back to birth. There were no documented cases, no suppressed legends, not even speculative myths about humans becoming outcasts. It didn't happen. Her thoughts stalled for half a second, recalibrating around a truth that refused to fit. She finally spoke, her voice lower than before. That's impossible. Ethan only shrugged, still watching her. Yet here I am. If you think I'm lying, you're free to believe that, but this is the truth. 100%. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 82, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 56, chapter 56, Dance. Raven was in full swing inside Nevermore Academy. Every student, every teacher, all of them indoors dancing beneath strobing lights. The courtyard was empty. The iron gates stood open and unattended. No one was keeping watch because no one expected trouble. After all, who would be stupid enough to wander onto Nevermore grounds at night? Normies avoided the place like a curse. But there were always idiots who mistook fear for a challenge. Tonight, that idiocy arrived on 4 wheels in the form of a water truck. It rolled onto the ground slowly, headlights off, tires whispering over stone. From the outside, it looked official enough, just another piece of infrastructure no one ever questioned. With the entire campus distracted by music in motion, there was no one left to ask why it was there. The truck stopped near the external fire system. The doors swung open. Lucas jumped down first, grinning, followed closely by his lackeys. They moved with practiced confidence, fueled by spite and the thrill of being somewhere they didn't belong. Inside the truck were large tanks filled with a thick red liquid paint, heavily mixed, dark enough to pass for blood. They dragged the hose out and locked it into the fire system connection. Metal clanged softly as it snapped into place. One of the boys snickered. Nevermore loves drama, Lucas said. So let's give them some. Another spat on the ground. Yeah, how dare they mess with the cracked stone statue. Lucas's smile widened. Let's turn their little dance bloody. Make them panic. Make them run. Inside, the music was already in full swing, loud, relentless, filling every corner of the room. Lights swept across the crowd in quick pulses, flashing against white fabric and flushed faces as students danced, shouted, and lost themselves in the noise. In the middle of it all were Enid and Ethan. The music shifted again, lighter, louder, impossible to ignore. Enid didn't hesitate. She grabbed Ethan's hand and pulled him back onto the floor, already moving, already smiling. She danced the way she always did, open, fearless, completely unconcerned with how she looked. Every beat found her instantly. See, she said over the music. This is the fun part. Ethan laughed despite himself. I'll take your word for it. They moved together for a few moments, Enid spinning once, then twice, her hair catching the light as she laughed. She was clearly in her element, and Ethan let her set the pace, following rather than leading. Then the song changed. The lights dimmed. The rhythm slow, deliberate, uneven, almost unsettling. Wednesday stepped in without asking. Ethan barely had time to register her presence before she stopped directly in front of him. For a brief moment, she simply looked at him, expression unreadable, posture rigid as if daring him to misinterpret the situation. Then, carefully, he placed his hands at her waist. Wednesday did not pull away. She allowed it nothing more. Her movements were minimal, precise, each step measured and exact. She didn't sway, she didn't smile, but she followed the rhythm flawlessly, dark dress cutting through the sea of white like a blade through silk. This song, she said flatly, is acceptable. Ethan raised an eyebrow, adjusting to her restrained pace. That might be the nicest thing you've said all night. She didn't answer. Her gaze drifted past him, over his shoulder, cataloging the room rather than acknowledging him. Still, she remained there, moving with him, letting his hands stay where they were. That alone felt dangerous. A moment later, Enid slipped back in beside them. Wow, she said brightly. Look at us. A trio. The next beat hit harder, and Enid laughed, catching Ethan's free hand and tugging him back into motion, her energy surging as the rhythm swelled around them. The DJ's voice rang out over the speakers, bright and insistent. Yo, almost 11 o'clockity, so haul it out on the dance floor one last time before the Raven says nevermore. Cheers broke out as the opening beat hit. When I got you next to me, the floor filled instantly. Lights flared, music surged, and Enid was already dancing, moving without hesitation, laughing as she spun into the crowd. She didn't overthink it. She never did. The rhythm caught her, and she let it. All night, I'll riot with you. At the edge of the floor, Wednesday stood rigid, arms crossed, black dress stark against the sea of white. Ethan was beside her, watching Enid with mild amusement. She's enjoying herself, he observed. That is her natural state, Wednesday replied flatly. Over-enthusiastic. As if summoned by criticism, Enid spotted them. Her face lit up. I know you got my back, and you know I got you. Before Wednesday could retreat, Enid grabbed her wrist. Nope. Last dance. You're not escaping. Wednesday resisted for exactly 1 second, long enough to make a point, then allowed herself to be dragged onto the floor. She moved stiffly at first, clearly unimpressed, her motions restrained and deliberate, like she was negotiating with the music rather than surrendering to it. Ethan stayed back, watching. Enid danced like she always did, bright, fearless, alive. Beside her, Wednesday moved with reluctant precision, dark and controlled, an anomaly among the chaos. Ethan's gaze drifted past the dance floor. Then he spotted the fire alarm. And Lucas, standing next to it, smiling like he'd just discovered free will. Oh, Ethan muttered. Of course. He sighed, already backing away from the music. Great. 3 idiots, 1 alarm, and a perfectly good dance about to be ruined. Tragic. Guess I'd better stop this before Raven turns into a low-budget horror movie. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 85, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 57, Chapter 57, Idiots. Lucas's fingers hovered inches from the fire alarm. His pulse thundered with anticipation, thrill of it, the promise that in mere seconds the room would erupt into chaos, screams echoing beneath a rain of dripping red humiliation. It would be poetic. Perfect revenge for what had happened on Outreach Day. Lucas felt the movement halt before he fully understood why. Fingers closed around his wrist, not roughly, but with enough certainty to make resistance pointless. He sucked in a breath and turned. Ethan stood behind him, posture relaxed, expression calm in a way that felt deliberate. There was no anger in his face, no urgency, just quiet awareness, as if he had arrived exactly when he meant to. You know, Ethan said, almost conversationally, I was actually enjoying tonight. Lucas tried to pull free. He didn't move an inch. I danced, Ethan continued, with 2 beautiful girls. That alone makes this night statistically rare. He leaned in just enough for Lucas to hear him over the music. And I can't let you ruin it. Lucas's brows knitted together, confusion flashing across his face. One of them, Ethan went on, voice lowering, might even appreciate your little stunt. At first. But she'd hate it the moment she realized it wasn't blood, just paint. Ethan tilted his head. So no, I can't let you pull that. Lucas stared at him, mind scrambling. How did he know? And worse, what kind of person talked about liking being soaked in red like that? So, Ethan said quietly, tightening his grip, come with me. I think it's time you learned a lesson about not messing with Nevermore again. He didn't wait for an answer. Ethan pulled Lucas away from the alarm, steering him toward the oxytno, dragging him. Lucas stumbled, shoes scraping against the floor as he tried to resist, panic replacing his earlier excitement. Hey, let go of me. Lucas hissed, glancing back toward the dance floor. At the entrance, Lucas's 2 lackeys hovered near the doors, fidgeting as their eyes darted around them. One of them frowned. Why isn't Lucas coming back? The other shrugged. Relax. He just went in. No need to rush. Before the question could linger, the doors slammed open. Both of them flinched. Ethan stood in the doorway. Their expressions shifted instantly from confusion, to recognition, to fear. The last time they had crossed him, it had ended with a water barrel and a long, humiliating inversion. Their bodies remembered before their minds caught up. Both took an instinctive step back. Then they saw Lucas. His arm was caught in Ethan's grip, twisted just enough to keep him still. One look was enough for them to understand the plan was over. Whatever they had hoped to pull off had drained away completely. And if they were caught by him, the outcome would almost certainly be worse than last time. They didn't wait to hear what Ethan might say. Run, one of them muttered. They turned and bolted, shoes slipping as they fled, abandoning Lucas without a second thought. Ethan said mildly. And where do you think you're going? He snapped his fingers. Both lackeys were yanked off their feet mid-stride, lifted clean into the air as if caught by an invisible grip. They flailed uselessly, panic setting in as they dangled several feet above the floor. Ethan looked back at the 3 of them, his expression calm, unsettlingly so. Funny thing, he went on, almost conversational. You all seemed very eager to paint people red tonight. A thin smile crossed his face. It wasn't friendly, so I thought I'd return the favor. All 3 swallowed hard. In that moment, the same thought hit them at once. They should have stayed in their rooms. Slept. Done nothing at all. Whatever satisfaction they'd expected from this night wasn't worth what was about to happen. Raven ended. Music cut short. Doors opened wide. Students streamed out, laughing until whatever waited outside stole the sound from them. They saw it. 3 boys knelt on the ground just beyond the entrance. Their wrists were bound, their clothes drenched in red paint that dripped steadily onto the pavement, pooling beneath them in glossy streaks. Cardboard signs hung from their necks, letters scrawled thick and uneven. We are idiots. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, whoa, what the hell? A snort of laughter broke the silence. Then another. Phones came out almost on instinct, camera shutters clicking as angles were found and documented. Is this some kind of performance art? Nuthat's the mayor's kid. That's paint right. The boys kept their heads lowered. No protests. No explanations. The crowd parted as Principal Weems strode forward, irritation etched clearly across her face. Her eyes swept over the Seneth restraints, the red stains, Lucas's unmistakable expression of humiliation. Who did this? She demanded. Silence. Her gaze shifted and stopped. A truck stood nearby. A water truck. Hoses are still damp. Red streaks smeared along its metal sides. Weems' eyes narrowed. That told her enough. 3 Jericho boys. Never more grounds. During Raven. With equipment like that, the intent was obvious and thoroughly unacceptable. She stepped closer. Care to explain why you're here at this hour? She asked coolly. And why you brought that with you? Still nothing. Weems' expression hardened. Because if I don't hear a very convincing explanation in the next 5 seconds, she said evenly, my next call will be to the mayor. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 85, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 58, chapter 58, Revival. At the same time, in an unknown location, the room was dim, lit by a single exposed bulb that cast uneven shadows along the walls. Glass jars lined the shelves, each one holding something preserved, something vital. Organs suspended in cloudy liquid, carefully labeled, carefully collected. Marilyn Thornhill stood before them, with her broken hand, studying the display with quiet satisfaction. Everything was falling into place. The final preparations were nearly complete. Soon, her ancestor would return, and when that moment came, these outcasts so confident, so careless would finally burn. She turned slightly, her voice softening as if she were speaking about something mundane. Tyler, dear, she said gently, do you think you could sneak a shotgun out of your father's office? She smiled when she said it, the kind of smile that suggested this wasn't a request, it was an expectation. She knew better than to underestimate him. Whatever Ethan was, he wasn't something she could deal with using the methods she'd relied on before. Knives, claws, brute force, none of those would be enough. Not against a creature who could stop people mid-stride and smile while doing it. But bullets were different. Metal didn't care about lineage or supernatural arrogance. Firearms were clean, final. And she doubted his skin unnatural as it wascould shrug off high-caliber rounds. Marilyn's gaze lingered on the jars a moment longer before she turned away, already planning the next step. If she couldn't cut him down the old way, she'd adapt. After all, monsters learned. And so did she. Tyler stood at the back of the room, jaw clenched so tightly it ached. He hadn't forgotten. Not the pain. Not the humiliation. Not the way he was defeated the last time he'd faced Ethan, helpless and exposed. The memory burned hotter than the fear. His hands curled into fists. I can defeat him, Tyler said through his teeth. If I get another chance. There was desperation in it, and something else, anger sharpened into resolve. Do as I say, Marilyn replied calmly. Do I need to say it again? She finally turned, her expression composed, almost maternal. You have another job. Tyler swallowed, nodding despite himself. She smiled small, satisfied. As the master of the hide, she knew it would obey her orders without hesitation or failure. So you're the one who did that? Enid asked, staring at the 3 kneeling boys, their signs, the red-stained mess. Yeah, Ethan said easily. They were trying to ruin Raven. I figured they deserved a lesson. Before Enid could respond, Wednesday had already moved closer to the truck. She dipped her finger into the red residue along the hose, examined it for a second, then touched it to her tongue. She frowned. Amateur work. Enid recoiled. You, Wednesday. It's paint, Wednesday said flatly. They didn't even bother with pig's blood. No commitment to authenticity whatsoever. Enid stared at the trio, then at the truck. So what were they planning to do with all that? What else? Wednesday replied. They intended to trigger the fire sprinklers and turn the finale into a red rainstorm. Maximum panic. Minimal imagination. She glanced back at the kneeling boys. Unfortunately for them, their plan backfired. Enid grimaced. That's horrible. Who does that? She looked down at her dress, visibly relieved. I would have been devastated if this got ruined. She turned toward Ethan, exhaling. Seriously, thank you. Enid slipped an arm around him in a quick side hug. Ethan blinked once, then smiled. Happy to preserve the evening. So, Principal Weems' voice cut in sharply, you're the one responsible for this. She had arrived just behind them. Enid immediately dropped her arm from Ethan's side and straightened, suddenly very interested in the ground. Ethan turned calmly. Yes, he said. Did I do something wrong? Yes, Weems replied coolly. Instead of creating this scene, you should have notified me or a faculty member. Ethan tilted his head. Oh, so I should have called you so you could politely ask them to leave and hope they listened? Weems' eyes narrowed. These 3 came here intending to vandalize Raven, Ethan continued evenly. If nothing happened, everyone would think that they can walk onto Nevermore grounds and do whatever they like. He gestured toward the kneeling trio, still dripping red paint. They needed a deterrent. I provided one. Silence followed. If you want to punish someone, Ethan added, start with them. Then he stepped past her. After that, you're welcome to punish me. He walked away without waiting for a response. Behind him, Enid exhaled. Wednesday watched Weems' expression cool into calculation. Principal Weems, Wednesday said quietly, your anger appears misdirected. You shouldn't always worry about normie-outcast relations, she continued evenly. We shouldn't be the ones constantly expected to make exceptions. Weems didn't respond. She was too busy realizing that, once again, Ethan Corvin had acted first and left her to manage the fallout. Not because he was the sponsor of school, but because, irritating as it was, he hadn't actually done anything wrong. Which meant her next conversation wouldn't be with a student. It would be with the mayor. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 86, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 59, Chapter 59, Killings in Parents. After the Raven incident, the consequences came quickly if not quite as harsh as they should have been. The mayor's son and his 2 lackeys were sentenced to community service. Not in Jericho, where their names still carried weight, but at Nevermore itself. Scrubbing stone paths, cleaning grounds, doing the kind of work they'd never imagined themselves lowered to. It was a fitting punishment being forced to maintain the very place they'd tried to humiliate. They kept their heads down, mostly. While this was happening, something far worse was unfolding in Jericho. The killings had increased. Before, it had been methadicalone death a week, spaced just far enough apart to let the town breathe before panicking again. After Raven, that restraint vanished. 3 people were found dead in 4 days. The pattern remained unchanged. Bodies were discovered mutilated. Fear settled into the town like rot. Shops closed early. Streets emptied before nightfall. Curtains stayed drawn even during the day. People stopped trusting shadows and each other. Sheriff Galpin felt the pressure tightening with every passing hour. The town council demanded answers. The mayor demanded results. And the people of Jericho demanded safety, something he could no longer convincingly promise. If this continued, Jericho wouldn't just be afraid, it would shut down. Ethan lowered the newspaper, skimming the headline one last time. She's really a crazy bitch, he thought. Killing her own kind just to fuel her hatred for outcasts. It tracked. No one in the Gates family had ever been normal. A father who gave his own son poison to wipe out an entire school. And now her murdering normies to resurrect another psychopathic ancestor, all for some twisted idea of revenge against outcasts. Same mindset, different generation. Psychopathy clearly ran in the family. They wrapped it in ideology and history, but it always came down to the same thing: using other people as disposable tools. Sacrifice everyone else. Call it justice. Ethan scoffed quietly and set the paper aside. Hypocrites. Well, he thought, I'm not much better. He knew who was behind it, had known for a while, and yet he'd said nothing, no to the sheriff, not to the town. Not because he couldn't stop it, but because stopping it now didn't serve him. He wasn't pretending otherwise. He was waiting, letting events move forward because they benefited him more that way. If that made him selfish, so be it. At least he didn't dress it up as righteousness. Ethan exhaled slowly. Everyone had their reasons. His were just honest. Like that, Parents' Day arriveth once-a-year event at Nevermore where students were expected to spend time with their parents under the polite fiction of bonding. The academy prepared accordingly. Banners went up. Schedules were printed. Faculty rehearsed their practiced smiles. Nevermore presented itself as refined, structured, and entirely unconcerned with the long history of familial dysfunction that came with educating outcasts. Parents began to arrive in waves, elegant, eccentric, unsettling in their own unique ways. Some hugged too tightly. Some kept a careful distance. Wednesday Addams regarded Parents' Day with her usual enthusiasm. None. To her, it was less about bonding and more about tolerating proximity. So those are your parents? Enid asked, glancing ahead. Morticia and Gomez Addams were approaching, perfectly composed, as if the rest of the courtyard were merely a backdrop arranged for their entrance. Yes, Wednesday said. Where are yours? Enid pointed. There. Her mother was already watching her, expression sharp and appraising, as if measuring what Enid had failed to become since the last visit. Enid's shoulders stiffened instinctively. Talking to her mother was exhausting. Every conversation circled back to the same subject: wolfing out. Camps, techniques, fixes. Enid could practically hear it forming. Have you wolfed out yet? Have you tried harder? Maybe if you went back to camp. As if trying harder would magically change her body. As if Enid's feelings were a minor inconvenience. Her father stood beside her mother, offering Enid a small, supportive smile. It helped. A little. Wednesday noticed the tension immediately. She looks disappointed, Wednesday said. Impressive. She hasn't even spoken yet. Enid sighed. That's kind of her thing. Gomez and Morticia reached them then, Gomez practically glowing, Morticia composed and watchful. Mercules. Gomez exclaimed, sweeping Wednesday into a brief, enthusiastic embrace. The air here crackles with tension. It reminds me of our honeymoon. Wednesday endured it. Barely. Morticia's eyes moved over her daughter, taking in every detail. You look yourself, she said softly. That was the intention, Wednesday replied. Enid shifted beside them, suddenly aware she was very much in the middle of an Addams family moment. Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Addams, she said quickly. I should get the whole family thing. She gestured vaguely toward her parents, already bracing herself. Gomez turned to her at once, beaming. Ah, you must be Enid. Wednesday speaks of you. Wednesday blinked. I do. Constantly, Gomez said cheerfully. You are the colorful one, yes? A delightful contrast, like a scream in a mausoleum. Enid smiled, unsure whether that was a compliment. I'll take that. Morticia inclined her head. Take care, Enid. Enid nodded, then hurried off toward her parents before any more attention could be drawn to her. Gomez watched her go, then leaned slightly toward Wednesday. She has spirit and nerves, a dangerous combination. She's tolerable, Wednesday said. After a beat, more than most. She glanced at the three of them, her mother, her father, and her Brotherian assessment rather than affection. Before any of them could respond, a voice cut in from just behind her. You must be Wednesday's parents and brother. All four Adamses turned at once. Ethan stood there. Gomez's eyes lit up with interest. Morticia studied him calmly. Pugsley stared without blinking. Wednesday turned last. Her expression didn't change, but the look in her eyes was unmistakable. What are you doing here? A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 87, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 60, Chapter 60, Morticia's suspicion. Gomez reacted first, as he always died with enthusiasm. Well, he said, clasping his hands. A young man who introduces himself properly. That's already a rare quality. Morticia's gaze lingered on Ethan, calm and deliberate. She didn't smile, but something in her eyes sharpened as she took in the way Wednesday reacted to him, or rather, the way she pretended not to. Why are you here? Wednesday asked. Her tone was flat, but the irritation underneath was unmistakable. She was already in a foul mood. This only worsened it. She had no desire for Ethan to meet her family. She knew his intentions toward her, and if he spoke to them, it would invite assumptions. She refused to tolerate teenage romance, emotional expectations, things she had no interest in. She preferred control, and this situation had too many variables already. I was bored, Ethan said easily. No one came to see me, so I thought I'd stop by. We're friends, aren't we? He tilted his head slightly. You're not really going to let me wander around alone on Parents' Day? Yes, Wednesday replied without hesitation. If it means fewer headaches. Gomez laughed, delighted. Ah, such affection, expressed with such cruelty. It warms my heart. Morticia's gaze shifted to Wednesday. Who is this Wednesday? Aren't you going to introduce your friend? Wednesday had never spoken of having a friend who happened to be a boy. She didn't need to. The fact that she tolerated Ethan stood beside him without the instinctive urge for violence said more than any confession ever could. Morticia was her mother, after all. She knew how to read the signs. He is Wednesday began, then paused, visibly displeased. Ethan, she finished flatly. Yes, I'm Ethan, he said, extending his hand without hesitation. Wednesday's friend. Gomez took it immediately, gripping with enthusiasm. Ah, a brave claim, he said warmly. Anyone who survives my little Scorpio's company tends to be memorable. Morticia observed the handshake, then Ethan. Friend, she repeated softly, testing the word. Her eyes flicked to Wednesday. An interesting choice. It wasn't a choice, Wednesday said. It happened. Ethan smiled faintly. That's usually how the important ones do. Wednesday shot him a warning look. So how did you meet Wednesday? Pugsley asked, genuinely curious. Well, Ethan said thoughtfully, at our first meeting, I think she warned me she'd gouge out my eyes. Pugsley's face lit up. Cool. Morticia turned her attention back to Wednesday. So, she said gently, how is school? Wednesday didn't hesitate. I thought Thing was filling you in on my every move. I uncovered your feeble subterfuge almost immediately. Morticia inclined her head, unoffended. Of course you did. Gomez leaned in, suddenly concerned. So how's the little fella doing? He peered around as if Thing might appear on cue. Does he still have all his fingers? Relax, Wednesday said. I haven't snapped any of his digits. Yet. Gomez exhaled in relief. Ah, self-restraint. You're growing. Morticia folded her hands. Tell us everything. Wednesday's eyes darkened slightly. Since you abandoned me here, I've been haunted, and made the target of an attempted murder. She paused. I've also acquired an annoying stalker who knows far too much about me and about whom I know nothing. Her gaze shifted, briefly but pointedly, to Ethan. I'm that stalker, Ethan said calmly. There was a beat. Then Gomez smiled broadly. Ah, nevermore, he said with feeling. I love you so. Principal Weems appeared beside them, posture stiff, expression carefully neutral. Morticia, she said. It seems you've arrived. Morticia turned smoothly. Larissa, she said, unbothered. Still carrying the weight of the institution on your shoulders. Weems' lips tightened. And your daughter isn't making my life any easier, she replied. After a beat, she added, why don't we talk in my office and recount our academy days? Morticia inclined her head, amused. How nostalgic. Wednesday interjected, tone flat. If this is an ambush disguised as reminiscing, I'd prefer to be excluded. Well, Wednesday, Weems said evenly, turning towards her, you're coming too. We need to talk about your therapy. Wednesday met her gaze without flinching. I was under the impression it was no longer needed. On the contrary, Weems said evenly, it's very much necessary. Wednesday sighed almost imperceptibly. I should have known. Ethan took a step back. Then enjoy the meeting, he said lightly. I'll go say hi to Enid's parents. No, Wednesday said immediately. She caught his hand before he could turn away. You're coming with me, she added, tone clipped and decisive. You will serve as a buffer against my overly affectionate parents and this persistent illusion that I'm a patient in need of therapy. Don't you find me annoying? Ethan asked, smiling. He'd heard the accusation often enough to expect it by now. Wednesday didn't miss a beat. If I had to rank everyone present from least to most annoying, she said evenly, you would place last. Ethan blinked. That's good. It's strategic, Wednesday replied. Between my mother's emotional insight and Principal Weems' fixation on therapy, your presence is the lesser irritation. She tightened her grip on his hand just slightly, as if to emphasize the point. Morticia, watching quietly, allowed herself a faint smile. She recognized the emotion immediately. It mirrored what she herself had felt when she first met Gomez. Wednesday, however, was not like her. She concealed her feelings behind precision and detachment, refusing to name them even to herself. Morticia couldn't be sure how her daughter understood what she felt toward this buoyantly that, on some level, she did. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 87, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 61, Chapter 61, A Raven is Not a Dove. In Principal Weem's office, the Addams family and Ethan sat together while Morticia carefully went through an old Nevermore yearbook. Its pages were yellowed with age. It was from the time when she and Weems had both been students. "Our old yearbook," Morticia said fondly, pausing over one of the photographs. "I haven't laid eyes on this in over 20 years. Such good times we had, didn't we, Larissa?" Weems glanced over, her tone dry as ever. "Some of us had better times than others." As a student at Nevermore, Larissa Weems had lived largely in Morticia Addams' orbit. Morticia had been remembered, celebrate Devon Crown champion, while Weems had stood beside her, competent and capable, but rarely the one people noticed. It wasn't bitterness so much as memory. Nevermore had simply never belonged to her the way it had to Morticia. "Oh, don't be so modest," Morticia said. "You always filled a room with your presence, like a stately sequoia. And I suppose that makes you the lumberjack," Weems shot back. Morticia's eyes lit with genuine delight. "There's that cutting wit I always admired. Do you remember our duet at the Solstice Talent Show? Your Judy Garland impression was uncanny." She turned the page and paused. "Oh," Morticia said softly. "My picture's gone." "Really?" Weems replied, lifting a brow with practiced surprise. "How strange." Morticia closed the book with care. "May I borrow this for the weekend? Gomez and I enjoy the occasional walk down memory lane." She glanced at Gomez. He responded instantly with a low, theatrical roar. Weems pinched the bridge of her nose. Ethan, who had been watching the exchange in quiet disbelief, leaned slightly toward Wednesday. "Do your parents often do this?" he asked. He already knew they were excessively affectionate, unable to keep their hands off each other, but seeing it in person was something else entirely. For the first time, he understood exactly why Wednesday once compared them to a pair of rabbits in heat. "Yes," Wednesday replied without hesitation. "They display their emotions constantly, regardless of location, audience, or social appropriateness." She paused, watching Gomez beam at Morticia. "It's nauseating," she added. "They also tend to forget they're in front of their children." "All right," Weems said, straightening in her chair. "Let's get down to the matter at hand, shall we?" Her gaze moved pointedly away from Morticia and Gomez, making it clear she had no desire to witness any further displays of affection. They weren't here to reminisce or flirt, but to discuss the reason this meeting had been called in the first place. Morticia and Gomez quickly ceased their public display of affection. "Unfortunately," Weems continued, "Wednesday's assimilation has been uneven. That's because I refuse to participate in the culture of dishonesty and denial that permeates this institution," Wednesday replied evenly. Gomez nodded at once. "We've always encouraged Wednesday to speak her mind. And sometimes," Weems said, unfazed, "that mind is weaponized." "Only against vulnerable targets," Wednesday said. "I prefer efficiency." Weems chose not to engage. According to her therapist, Wednesday has been less than forthcoming. "Their sessions have not produced the progress we were hoping for." "I'm not a lab rat," Wednesday said evenly. "You can't expect me to open up on command and confess my thoughts like some fragile volunteer, simply because a therapist delivers a few carefully rehearsed lines meant to inspire trust. I've spoken with Dr. Kinbot," Weems continued, ignoring Wednesday's sarcasm, "and we both believe it would be beneficial for you all to attend a family therapy session this weekend." "No," Wednesday said at once. "I anticipated that response," Weems replied evenly. "Fortunately, your parents are capable of seeing the merit in it." Morticia tilted her head. "Not to align myself with Wednesday," she said calmly, "but we are only here for the weekend." "Principal Weems," Ethan asked, breaking the silence, "do you really think therapy would work on Wednesday?" Weems turned toward him, clearly displeased by the interruption. "And why wouldn't it?" "You can't turn a raven into a dove by painting it white," Ethan replied calmly. "It will still be a raven. Wednesday will still be Wednesday." Wednesday glanced at him. "Once. Even if she attends 1,000 therapy sessions," Ethan continued, unfazed, "the only person I'd be concerned about is the therapist. I can't imagine Wednesday breaking down. I can imagine the therapist reconsidering their career choice and possibly the nearest window." Weems stared at him. Gomez beamed. "I like him." Morticia's lips curved slightly. "But that isn't for her to decide," Weems said firmly. "Therapy is court-ordered." For once, Ethan had no response. After a brief exchange between Morticia and Gomez, they both nodded in agreement. Weems allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Wednesday did not share it. She already despised therapy. Now she was expected to endure it with her parents present. A new variation of torture, she noted, that involved prolonged eye contact and emotional honesty. Ethan rose from his seat. "I'll see you around," he said quietly before heading off to find Enid's parents. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 89, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 62, Chapter 62, Boyfriend. In the quad, Enid sat at one of the tables with her parents, pushing her food around her plate. Her mother leaned closer, her smile tight with expectation. "So," she asked, "have you wolfed out yet?" Enid's own smile slipped, just slightly. She recognized that Lunite's familiar disappointment, the unspoken comparison to cousins and siblings who had changed on schedule. "Not yet," Enid said carefully. Her mother's expression hardened. Enid, you're 16. Your cousin shifted at 13. Your brother at 12. Enid lowered her gaze, nudging her food aside. I'm fine, she said softly. I really am. I like who I am. That was the problem with most parents. They measured their children against the achievements of others their age, never pausing to understand who their own child actually weighs or who they might become. Her mother sighed, already shaking her head. Liking it doesn't make it normal. She continued, voice firm but edged with worry. If you don't wolf out before you come of age, it becomes harder for finding a mate, for fitting into a pack. So what? Enid asked, her voice tightening despite herself. Do you think I'm not wolfing out because I don't want to? That I'm not trying? She looked up at her mother. What more do you expect from me? It's not like this is something I can just decide to do. Esther Sinclair's expression softened only slightly. You need to try harder, she said. Are you eating enough red meat? I am eating, Enid said quietly. Esther wasn't convinced. Eating isn't the same as eating right, she replied. Your aunt says iron makes all the difference. Protein helps the change. I'm not a recipe, Mom. Esther sighed. I'm only trying to help. I just don't want you falling behind. Enid pushed her tray away slightly. I'm not behind, she said. I'm just different. Her mother's expression shifted into familiar disappointment, the kind Enid had learned to recognize without needing it explained. Her father remained quiet, offering no commentary. He never did, but there was something gentler in his silence, something that felt less like judgment and more like understanding. Enid wished she could disappear from the conversation entirely. Hello, sorry to intrude. The voice came from her side. Enid turned, relief immediate, and found Ethan settling into the empty seat beside her. She smiled, grateful for the interruption. Esther looked at Ethan, clearly confused, unsure who he was or why he had appeared. Hi, Ethan said politely. I'm Ethan, Enid's boyfriend. Enid's smile widened just a little at that. Esther paused, her expression tightening as she studied Ethan more closely. Oh, she said slowly. I see. What kind of outcast are you? Esther asked, eyeing him closely. I'm a vampire, Ethan replied simply. There was a brief pause. Esther nodded once, as if filing the information away, though her expression suggested she wasn't quite sure what to do with it yet. Yes, Ethan continued, meeting Esther's gaze, and I heard you were worried about Enid not wolfing out. You don't need to. He glanced at Enid, then back again. Even without it, Enid is special. She's kind, she supports the people around her, and she shows up when it matters. That counts for something. Enid blinked, surprised. She doesn't need to change to belong, Ethan added quietly. She already does just the way she is. But as a werewolf, Esther said carefully, if she doesn't wolf out, she'll be looked down on by others. Ethan didn't hesitate. That's the last thing you should worry about, he said calmly. As long as she has people who care about her, that won't happen. At the same time, the Nevermore morgue was unusually tense. This is a first, one of the deputies muttered, staring at the body. Never had a suicide in the morgue before. Sheriff Galpin stepped closer. What VE we got? The gun was legal, a technician said, flipping through his notes. Registered to him. Col.45. The janitor says he keeps it in his desk. I just spoke to Doc last week. He was talking about a cruise. Retirement. Sheriff Galpin shook his head. He sounded excited. Guess you never really know what someone's thinking. Galpin looked at the body. A bullet, apparently he straightened. Any security footage? No, the deputy replied. The camera was turned toward the wall. Nothing was recorded. They're scrubbing the footage now, the deputy continued, trying to figure out how long it's been there. The suicide note says he felt guilty. About an old case. Galpin took it. Read. It says he covered it up, the officer continued. Faked the coroner's report. Lived with guilt all these years. Galpin looked up slowly. What case? Garrett Gates. Galpin's expression hardened instantly. Garrett Gates, he repeated. You've got to be kidding me. You heard of it. I've been waiting 30 years to put away his murderer, Galpin said, voice tight. You know who did it. There's only ever been one suspect, Galpin replied. I always thought someone buried the truth. He folded the note carefully, resolve settling in his eyes. Now, he said, I've got my proof. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 90, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 63, Chapter 63, Arrest. The door to Dr. Kinbot's office in Jericho opened. Wednesday stepped out first, her expression flat, already dismissing the session as a waste of oxygen. Morticia followed, her composure intact, but there was anger beneath it now, restrained and sharp. Wednesday, Morticia said quietly, stopping her, how could you do that to your father? Wednesday turned. I didn't accuse him, she replied. You and father hid the truth. I asked questions. You dragged up a murder case from 20 years ago, Morticia said, her voice tightening. In front of strangers. You lecture me endlessly about honesty, Wednesday said. About transparency. About how secrets rot families from the inside. I simply applied your philosophy. Morticia's eyes hardened. The truth is your father did not commit that crime. The charges were cleared. But the sheriff is saying something else, Wednesday continued, unflinching. He's been waiting decades to reopen it. People don't wait that long unless they believe something was buried. Morticia looked away for the briefest moment. That case is finished, Morticia said. And your father is innocent. Then tell me the truth, Wednesday replied at once. What happened 20 years ago? Why was father accused in the first place? Morticia stopped. For the first time, her composure wavered not visibly, but enough for Wednesday to notice. A pause too long, a breath measured too carefully. You're looking for meaning where there is none, Morticia said. The past was misunderstood. That's evasive, Wednesday said. And unlike you. Morticia turned back to her, eyes dark now. Some truths protect more than they reveal. Secrets, Wednesday countered, are just lies that learn to wait. Morticia held her gaze. Not everything is yours to uncover. Wednesday's expression hardened. Then you're hiding something. Morticia didn't deny it. And that, more than anything else, told Wednesday she was right. Wednesday and Morticia's argument was still unfolding on the sidewalk when the wail of a siren sliced through it. Both of them stopped arguing. A patrol car pulled up to the curb. The engine cut. Sheriff Galpin stepped out alone, his expression set, purpose written plainly across his face. Gomez Adams. Morticia turned first. Her posture straightened, her face smoothing into something unreadable. Gomez followed, surprise flickering only briefly before his usual composure returned. Sheriff, he said lightly. An unexpected reunion. Galpin didn't smile. He raised his badge. You're under arrest for the murder of Garrett Gates. The words hit like a dropped blade. Wednesday was already moving, placing herself slightly in front of her father. On what evidence? We have new information, Galpin said, eyes fixed on Gomez. And what precisely constitutes new? Wednesday pressed. The former coroner is dead, Galpin replied. Suicide. He left a note. Said he falsified the autopsy report. Covered up the truth. Morticia's breath caught just barely. Galpin finally shifted his attention to Wednesday. I've waited 20 years to close this case. He stepped forward and secured the cuffs around Gomez's wrists. Gomez didn't resist. He only looked at Morticia, then at Wednesday. The officers escorted Gomez to the car and opened the door. The cuffs clicked softly as they guided him inside. Pugsley stood frozen on the sidewalk, staring after the vehicle as it pulled away. His confusion was plain, written across his face. Morticia remained where she was, but the change in her was unmistakable. Her posture stiffened, her composure cracking just enough to show strain. One hand tightened at her side, her gaze fixed ahead, no longer calm. Pugsley, Wednesday said evenly, breaking the stillness, take mother back to Nevermore. Now. Pugsley hesitated, then nodded, slipping his hand into Morticia's. Morticia allowed herself to be led away, her silence heavier than any protest. Wednesday stayed behind. As the patrol car disappeared down the street, the pieces began to align neatly. 20 years of nothing, and the moment her family returned to Jericho, the evidence surfaced. A dead coroner. A confession. An arrest timed with surgical precision. Sometime later, Wednesday visited her father in jail to ask what really happened 20 years ago. Gomez told her about Raven Knight. Garrett Gates had been obsessed with her mother. He broke into Nevermore and confronted him, and the encounter turned violent. Garrett picked up a sword, they fought, and the struggle spilled onto the scaffolding. In the chaos, the sword changed hands. Garrett was stabbed and fell. Larissa Weems witnessed what followed. Wednesday listened without interrupting. She had spent her life observing her father. She knew the rhythm of his voice, the way his words tightened when he was avoiding something, and now she recognized it immediately. He was lying. Her father wasn't guilty, which meant the mystery remained and she would see it through until his innocence was undeniable. Wednesday didn't bother knocking. She was already inside Galpin's office before he could react. We need to talk. Galpin stiffened. How the hell did you get in? Bernice. Wednesday called out loudly toward the hall. Bernice. Galpin winced. Don't. Bernice may or may not have received a call claiming her tabby cat, Swifty, is being held for ransom, Wednesday said evenly. I'm guessing that bought me about 3 uninterrupted minutes. Galpin exhaled through his nose. What do you want, Adams? My father did not kill Garrett Gates. Galpin scoffed. I have a signed confession, and the coroner identified the saber used in the murder. He lifted a folder, both of which I'm about to deliver to the district attorney. Wednesday didn't blink. Don't you find the timing convenient? He paused barely. The coroner kills himself out of remorse for a decades-old murder case, she continued. The same weekend my father, your prime suspect, returns to town after 20 years. All I see, Galpin said coldly, is a guilty man finally paying for his crime. How are you failing to see this? She pressed. Someone is actively trying to derail my investigation. Galpin folded his arms. You mean your little monster hunt? I found the monster blood sample, Wednesday said. I gave you DNA evidence. A beat. Did you even bother to test it? This may come as a shock, Galpin replied flatly, but the world doesn't revolve around you. He reached into a drawer and tossed a document onto the desk between them. Here, DNA results. Wednesday scanned it quickly. No match. Inconclusive. So you should leave, Adams, he said sharply. I don't have the time or the patience to play detective games with you. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 91, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 64, chapter 64, case closed, 1. Evening settled over Nevermore. Ethan was walking down the corridor when he suddenly paused mid-step. No reason, no warning, just a strange feeling tugging at the back of his mind. It wasn't fear, more like an itch he couldn't scratch, the kind that made you stop and rethink your life choices. What the hell is this feeling? The Gates psychopath, he muttered under his breath. She must be planning something. Then again, with a psychopath like her, planning something was practically a hobby. It wouldn't be strange if she was scheming. What would be strange, and frankly alarming, was if she wasn't planning anything at all. For 3 days, he didn't see her. Usually, she maintained her teacher's composure-measured steps, a practiced smile, but for the past 3 days, she had vanished entirely from Nevermore. Still, he knew better than to assume that meant safety. Even if she was acting strangely, she couldn't do anything yet. The blood moon hasn't risen, Ethan muttered to himself. Until then, she won't make a move. The ritual demanded it. The resurrection of Joseph Crackstone required the night of the blood moon when dark magic reached its peak, and the boundary between death and return grew thin enough to tear. At the same time, within the Nightshade's secret society chamber, the air was still. Wednesday Addams stood across from her mother. There was space between them, deliberate, careful. I know Father didn't kill Garrett Gates, she said. I've seen him lie before, and when he said he killed Gates, I saw the lie. Morticia Addams stiffened. Just slightly. Enough for Wednesday to notice. He's lying so the truth he's hiding won't surface, Wednesday said evenly. Mother, I need the whole truth if I'm going to save Father. Silence stretched between them. Morticia's composure didn't break, but it strained, like glass under pressure. At last, she exhaled slowly, deliberately. Yes, Morticia said softly. Your father didn't kill Garrett Gates. She paused. It was me. Then Morticia explained what had truly happened that night. Garrett had attacked Hurry's obsession, having curdled into something violent and unrestrained. In the struggle, Morticia had struck him. There had been no intention to kill, only to survive. Gomez had taken the blame without a second's hesitation. For him, love had always meant absolute devotion, bearing the consequences so she wouldn't have to. Wednesday listened without interruption. Then Morticia added something she hadn't meant to. I'll never forget the way he looked at me, she said. He was foaming at the mouth. His eyes, they weren't right. It was like staring into a rabid animal. Wednesday's eyes sharpened. Foaming at the mouth. She had heard that before. You said he was foaming, Wednesday repeated. And his eyes didn't look human. Morticia nodded slowly. I've never seen anyone so blinded by rage. Maybe it wasn't rage, Wednesday said. She turned slightly, thoughts aligning with cold clarity. Foaming saliva, dilated pupils, confusion, loss of control. She paused. Those aren't symptoms of jealousy. Morticia frowned. Then what are they? Wednesday met her gaze. They're textbook signs of it. Morticia inhaled sharply. But how could that be? Wednesday didn't answer immediately. There's only one way to find out, she said. Night had settled over Nevermore by the time Wednesday and Morticia emerged from the Nightshade Society's concealed entrance. They nearly walked straight into Ethan. He paused mid-step, clearly headed somewhere else. Oh, he said lightly. Didn't expect to run into you two here. Wednesday's eyes narrowed a fraction. Where are you going? Nowhere important, Ethan replied. Just thought I'd pay the mayor a visit. Suggest he closes the Garrett Gates case. He had been hoping to help his future father-in-law earn a few points, smooth things over. But that opportunity was slipping away. It was obvious now that they had uncovered the real reason Garrett Gates had died, and it wouldn't be long before the truth was proven and Wednesday's father was released. He sighed to himself. Well, there goes my chance of being the impressive son-in-law. Wednesday turned fully toward him. How? She asked. The sheriff won't listen to the mayor now. Not after the arrest. Ethan shrugged, unfazed. I'm not planning to persuade him. I'm planning to tell the truth. His gaze flicked briefly to Morticia, then back to Wednesday. The real reason Garrett Gates died, which I'm guessing you've already uncovered. There was a beat of silence. Yes, Wednesday said. We have. And you're not going to the mayor, she added flatly. Ethan opened his mouth to explain everything, but Wednesday didn't allow it. You're coming with me, she said instead, seizing his sleeve with decisive force. I'm not giving you the chance to derail this with theatrics or one of your deliberately vague monologues. Ethan blinked once. I was planning to tell you the truth, he replied, a hint of mild offense slipping past his usual calm. Do you really trust me that little? Wednesday didn't break stride. You have a well-documented tendency to treat the truth like a scavenger hunt, she said flatly. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 92, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 65, chapter 65, case closed, 2. Like that, Wednesday, Morticia, and Ethan arrived at the Jericho cemetery. They stopped in front of a single grave. Garrett Gates. Ethan took the shovel without comment. Digging graves wasn't new territory for an Addams, but it was different with Morticia watching. Wednesday would have done it without hesitation, expression unchanged, but Ethan stepped in first. Ethan adjusted his grip on the shovel and kept digging, steady and uncomplaining. If nothing else, he intended to make a respectable impression, grave digging included. Morticia watched with a faint, distant smile. This reminds me of the first time Wednesday dug up a grave, she said thoughtfully, as if recalling a family picnic. Ethan paused for half a second, then continued. This is also my first time digging one, he said, dryly. Morticia turned her gaze to her daughter. Did you hear that, Wednesday? It makes no difference, Wednesday replied without looking away from the grave. Everyone starts somewhere. Ethan glanced up at her. You make it sound like this is going to become a regular hobby. With your life choices, Wednesday said evenly, it's not an unreasonable assumption. Ethan wrinkled his nose as he pushed the shovel deeper into the soil. What makes you think I enjoy digging graves? He said. I'm a vampire, not a zombie. I don't eat dead bodies. The smell was getting worse, damp, sour, unmistakably rotten. He grimaced despite himself. But Wednesday enjoyed digging graves, Morticia added mildly. She was smiling so brightly the first time she dug one. Ethan chose not to comment. Some facts were better left untouched. Morticia tilted her head slightly. By the way, Ethan, may I call you that? Yes, he replied without hesitation. A brief pause followed as she studied him again, the way she always did, calm, perceptive, unsettling. Why didn't your parents come for the weekend? Morticia asked. Ethan's movements slowed, just a fraction. Then he answered simply, I don't have any. Morticia's expression softened, her voice gentle. I see. Ethan shrugged, returning the shovel to the soil. It never bothered me, he said evenly. I may look like a teenager, but I've been grown on the inside for a long time. That much was true. His first life hadn't offered much space for softness. A house filled with constant arguments. A father ground down by responsibility, carrying the weight of everyone. A mother who wanted more money, more comfort, more attention and was never satisfied with what she had. Voices raised every night. Silence thick every morning. Until one night, it all snapped. After that, there was no family to return to. At 12, he learned how quickly a life could collapse and how little sentiment did to stop it. Foster homes, empty rooms, too much time to think. A roller coaster that never slowed long enough to feel safe. So when he said he didn't mind having no family, he meant it. Absence had been quieter than chaos. Freedom had come with scars, but it was still freedom. The shovel struck wood. Ethan froze, then set the shovel aside and pried open the coffin lid. The stench hit immediately, thick, sour, unmistakable. Okay, he said, backing out of the pit without shame. I need space. Wednesday stepped down in his place, unfazed. With practiced efficiency, she cut through the rotted bindings and exposed the remains. Morticia leaned in as well, her composure intact despite the sight. They're on the finger. A faint bluish tinge, subtle but telling. Wednesday's eyes narrowed. Even after all this time, she said, that discoloration is unmistakable. Nightshade. Morticia inhaled slowly. So he was poisoned before his death. Wednesday nodded. The implications settled quickly. Which means my father didn't kill him. Garrett Gates was already dying. The stabbing was incidental. Ethan, still above ground and pinching his nose, added, there's more. Garrett didn't come to Raven empty-handed that night. He brought Nightshade with Hyme enough to poison Nevermore. Orders from his father. Wednesday looked up sharply. He carried it in his coat, Ethan continued. Bottle cracked during the scuffle. By the time the blade touched him, the poison was already doing its work. Why didn't you say this sooner? Wednesday asked, sharp. Ethan frowned. I was going to. You didn't exactly give me the opportunity, he said. I told you I was heading to the mayor to explain all of this. Before Wednesday could respond, a beam of light cut through the darkness. Well, a voice said dryly, this is turning into quite the family reunion. Bernice stepped closer, lowering her flashlight. The badge at her belt caught the light as she took in the open grave, the coffin, and the three of them standing there without a trace of surprise. Digging up bodies after midnight, she continued. That's one way to spend quality time. Wednesday didn't flinch. We were correcting a historical inaccuracy. Bernice sighed. Of course you were. Her gaze lingered on the exposed remains, then shifted to Morticia. The sheriff's going to want to hear about this. Immediately. Before that, Ethan said calmly, already pulling out his phone, I'm exercising my right to call my lawyer. Bernice opened her mouth to object, then stopped. Something in his tone suggested this wasn't a bluff. Mayor, he said when the call connected. It's Ethan Corvin. Yes, Ethan. I found out what Garrett Gates intended to do 20 years ago, Ethan continued, voice level. Nightshade. Enough to poison Nevermore. He was dying before the blade ever touched him. Another pause, longer this time. Yes, there's proof. He glanced back at Wednesday and Morticia, then at Bernice's stiffening posture. I want this case closed by tomorrow morning, Ethan said, quietly. Because if it isn't, every news outlet from here to the coast will hear the full story. And that won't be good for Jericho's future. Or its residents. He ended the call without waiting for a reply. Bernice exhaled, clearly regaining her footing. All right, she said, tone firm again. Whatever that call was, it doesn't change this. She gestured toward the open grave. You three are under arrest for grave desecration. Wednesday tilted her head slightly. A misdemeanor to expose a felony. Bernice ignored her. You can debate that with the sheriff. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 93, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 66, chapter 66, traumatized. Like that, they were brought into the Jericho sheriff's office and locked into holding. 2 cells, side by side, separated by thick metal bars. Gomez was already inside one of them. Wednesday, Morticia, and Ethan were pushed into the neighboring cell, the door slamming shut with a sharp clang. For a brief second, everyone froze, then Gomez noticed who had been placed beside him. My Querida, he exclaimed, rushing to the bars. Morticia stepped forward at once. Their fingers threaded through the gaps, hands clasping desperately, faces close despite the iron between them. Affection spilled out immediately, whispered endearments, relieved laughter, unrestrained devotion. Wednesday turned away on instinct. This is intolerable, she said flatly. Gomez beamed. Bars cannot restrain love, Querida. They are restraining my patience, Wednesday muttered. Guess they missed each other, Ethan said, deliberately keeping his eyes anywhere but that scene. Even for him, it was a lot. Yes, Wednesday replied dryly. Unfortunately, they've decided to make it everyone's problem. So Ethan started. Wednesday turned to him slowly, her stare sharp enough to cauterize. If you're about to exploit the emotional excess occurring 2 feet from us to flirt, reconsider. He stopped. The sensation you're mistaking for opportunity is nausea, she went on evenly. I'm not experiencing tenderness, vulnerability, or romantic inclination. I'm experiencing the psychological equivalent of motion sickness. Ethan held up his hands. Message received. There was a brief pause before Wednesday spoke again, her voice quieter but no less precise. Humph. Still thank you, she said, for preventing my father from remaining guilty. Ethan looked at her, mildly surprised. He hadn't expected gratitude, especially not from her. I'm sure you would have uncovered the truth without my involvement, he replied. Eventually. Wednesday tilted her head slightly. Possibly, but you accelerated the process. A moment later, an unmistakably affectionate sound drifted into her ears. Wednesday stiffened. She pinched the bridge of her nose, eyes narrowing. You too, she said flatly, not bothering to turn around. Exercise some restraint. Gomez laughed, utterly unrepentant. Morticia murmured something soothing that did absolutely nothing to help. Wednesday exhaled through her teeth. I retract my earlier statement, she added. I would rather be surrounded by hardened criminals than this. Early the next morning, the sheriff's office was jolted awake by hurried footsteps. The mayor burst through the doors, coat half-buttoned, breath uneven. His eyes immediately found the holding cells, Wednesday standing rigid, Morticia composed, Gomez unrepentantly cheerful, and Ethan visibly strained. Ethan looked up as the mayor approached. Dark circles framed his eyes. Mayor, he said flatly, I am not in a stable mental condition right now. If you have any influence left, I strongly suggest you use it to get me out of here. Immediately. He rubbed his temples. I've reached my limit. The mayor blinked, clearly unsure how to respond. He now fully understands why Wednesday finds her parents' affection intolerable. Prolonged exposure should be regulated. He can't take it anymore. Wednesday didn't comment. Her silence was agreement. At that moment, Sheriff Galpin emerged from his office, expression tight. Get them out of the cells, he ordered. All four of them. Meeting room. Now. Galpin opened the cell and the four got out. Gomez straightened, delighted. Ah, a change of scenery. Morticia took his arm calmly. Wednesday stepped forward without hesitation. Ethan followed, grateful for any environment that did not echo. In the sheriff's office meeting room, the mayor stood at the head of the table, hands braced against the wood. Sheriff, he said firmly, this case needs to be closed. Permanently. And Gomez Adams will be released. Galpin didn't sit. He paced. I have a confession. I have a weapon. I have a motive that held up for 20 years, he snapped. This goes to court. The mayor's patience thinned. Galpin, listen to me. Garrett Gates wasn't killed by Gomez Adams. He died of nightshade poisoning. That made Galpin stop. Do you know why Garrett went to Nevermore that night? The mayor continued. Do you know why he was carrying nightshade at all? Silence. He was planning to poison the entire school, the mayor said. Every outcast at Nevermore. There is proof. Physical proof. Even if Gomez hadn't touched him, Garrett Gates would have been dead by morning. I'm asking you to acknowledge the truth, the mayor replied, and the consequences of ignoring it. He turned slightly, gesturing toward Ethan, who was leaning back in his chair, cracking open an energy drink. His expression was calm, but his posture said he was barely holding together. There's also this, the mayor added, one of Jericho's largest private financiers. Ethan took a long sip, unimpressed. If this case continues, the mayor said carefully, that funding disappears. Schools, infrastructure, public services. This town does not function the way it does now without it. Galpin wasn't a fool. He understood exactly what the mayor was saying. If Garrett Gates had been carrying nightshade with the intent to poison Nevermore, then Gomez Adams hadn't murdered anyone. If anything, he had stopped a massacre. Galpin didn't like it. He didn't want to like it. 20 years of suspicion didn't dissolve easily. But facts had weight. And this time, they outweighed his resentment. His shoulders sagged a fraction. Fine, Galpin said at last. The word tasted bitter. He straightened, professionalism snapping back into place. The Gates case is closed. Cause of death will be amended. Gomez Adams will be released. Gomez smiled instantly, radiant. Morticia closed her eyes briefly, relief passing over her features like a shadow lifting. Ethan took another sip of his drink, visibly less tense. Wise decision, he said. For everyone. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 94, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 67, Chapter 67, Ravens and Wolves. Like that, Parents' Weekend drew to a close. The quad slowly emptied as families said their goodbyes, some tearful, some relieved, some dramatically affectionate. Enid stood near the entrance with her parents. Esther pressed a thick stack of glossy brochures into her hands, smiling a little too brightly. Well, Enid, here, she said. Enid looked down at the pile, blinking. What are these? Lycanthropy conversion camps, Esther replied matter-of-factly. Very reputable. Structured. Intensive. Results-oriented. Enid's ears practically flattened. She flipped through one brochure, eyes skimming phrases like accelerated wolfing out and unlock your true potential. Oh, she said weakly. Fun. Her father gave her an apologetic smile from behind Esther, hands tucked into his pockets, saying nothing but the look was familiar. But I won't be going to any camps, Enid said, still smiling, but this time there was steel under it. When I wolf out, I'll do it on my own, not on some timetable. For a split second, Esther's expression froze. She clearly hadn't expected resistance, certainly not delivered so calmly. Well, a familiar voice cut in, that was perfectly stated. Ethan seemed to materialize beside them, hands in his pockets, tone casual as if he hadn't just walked into a family standoff. Enid turned, startled. Where did you even come from? Strategic timing, he replied lightly, then turned to Esther. You don't need to worry about Enid. I'm confident she'll wolf out when she's ready. This isn't something that can be forced. You should trust her. She trusts herself. As her parents, shouldn't you do the same? Esther hesitated. The worry was still there, etched deep, but Enid's expression didn't waver. She looked happy. Certain. After a moment, she sighed. Well, take care of yourself, Enid. Her father stepped forward then, wrapping Enid in a warm hug. We're proud of you, he said softly, smiling in a way that said everything he couldn't out loud. They turned and walked away together. Enid watched her parents disappear into the crowd, her shoulders finally loosening. When she turned back, her smile was softer, more real. Thanks, she said quietly. Yesterday, he'd given her something she hadn't realized she needed: confidence, the courage to stand her ground, the reassurance that someone would stay, wolfed out or not. Ethan opened his mouth to reply. She didn't give him the chance. Rising onto her toes, she leaned in and kissed him light, quick, impulsive. Pure Enid. It lingered just long enough to make his breath catch before she pulled back again. Barely 5 seconds later, she smiled up at him, slipping her arm through his. Well, she said, voice warm, thanks for coming into my life. Ethan smiled. I'm glad I ended up with a little colorful wolf in mind. Enid's expression shifted just slightly. Curious. A hint of jealousy she didn't bother hiding. By the way, Wednesday didn't come back to the room last night. And you vanished from campus too. Did you do something behind my back? Ethan blinked once. Wow, that was fast. Nothing scandalous, he said easily. Unless you count grave digging. Her eyes widened. Grave digging. Me, Wednesday, and her mother, he added. We got arrested for it. Spent the night in a cell. Enid stopped walking. Why are you digging graves? She demanded. Do you ever do normal things? Like sleep? Or text? Enid, we're outcasts, Ethan said with a shrug. Being weird isn't unusual, it's basically the admission requirement. On Wednesday's side, the goodbyes were quieter. Morticia walked beside her as they moved away from the others, the yearbook tucked under her arm. As I leafed through the pages of this yearbook, Morticia said softly, pressing it into Wednesday's hands, I was reminded of all the wonderful times I had here. She paused, then added with gentle certainty, but those memories were mine. You have your own path to blaze. Wednesday looked down at the book, then back up. I don't want to be a stranger in your life, darling, Morticia continued. If you need me for anything at all, I am only a crystal ball away. Thank you, Mother, Wednesday said. Morticia's expression shifted, just a fraction. And be careful with your visions. Wednesday stiffened. How did you know? She asked. Did Thing tell you? Morticia smiled faintly. I'm your mother, Wednesday. I began having visions at your age too. Her gaze lingered, gentle but perceptive. And you've never been good at hiding things from me, especially when you think you are. That gave Wednesday pause. But ours aren't the same, Morticia went on. My visions were kinder. I see possibility paths that lead to hope. Different wavelengths. She studied her daughter closely. That's why I'm called a dove. You, Morticia continued, see what others refuse to look at. Violence, betrayal, death. You see danger before it arrives. Her voice lowered. That's why they call you a raven. I want to help you, Morticia said gently, but it isn't my place. When the time is right, someone from the spirit world, someone from our bloodline will guide you. Someone like Goody? Wednesday asked. Morticia's gaze darkened. Is she your guide? I believe so. Then be cautious, Morticia said, her voice firming. Goody was a powerful witch, but her thirst for revenge consumed her. It blinded her. In the end, she couldn't even save herself. Tread carefully, Wednesday. Then, almost casually, and about that boy, Ethan. I have no romantic feelings for him, Wednesday replied immediately, not missing a beat. Morticia arched a brow. Is that so? A faint smile touched her lips. Interesting. I didn't say anything about romance. Wednesday's gaze snapped at her mother. Goodbye, Mother, Wednesday said, and turned away before Morticia could respond. Gomez watched her go, her figure retreating across the courtyard. Is something amiss? He asked lightly. Morticia's gaze lingered on their daughter. Wednesday has formed an attachment, she said, her voice calm, almost clinical. She simply refuses to acknowledge it. Gomez's eyes sparkled with instant understanding. Ah, the boy. He nodded once, decisively. I approve. A proud smile followed. An excellent match. Morticia allowed herself the faintest smile. She will deny it for as long as she is able. Naturally, Gomez replied warmly. She is our daughter. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 95, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 68, Chapter 68, Death. In the woods of Jericho, Wednesday stopped in front of the cave. It was exactly where Xavier's drawings had placed Ithadin, behind a cluster of trees. Eugene lifted the sketch again, comparing it to the real thing. See, this is the same cave in the picture. Yes, Wednesday said, studying the lines of stone and shadow. She held the drawing beside the entrance. The angles, the proportions, even the jagged edge of rock matched almost perfectly. 100% match. There was no hesitation in her tone. She could say it with certainty. Now this was the monster's lair. Wednesday slipped the drawing back into her bag and pulled out a flashlight, clicking it on. The beam cut into the darkness, revealing damp stone and a path that disappeared deeper underground. Eugene shifted uneasily. You're going inside. He hadn't believed the monster rumors before. Not really, But after the recent murders, standing this close to the cave made his skin crawl. Yes, Wednesday replied. She took a step forward. If you're scared, she added calmly, you can stay here. And if you hear my screams about blood and murder, don't come down to do anything. It just means I'm enjoying myself. Eugene stared at her, unsure whether to laugh or run. He had never quite known what to say about Wednesday's hobbies, and right now, words completely failed him. Before he could manage a response, Wednesday stepped into the cave. The beam of her flashlight slid across the stone wall and then she was swallowed by the darkness. Eugene swallowed hard. Left alone among the trees, with the cave breathing quietly in front of him, he hesitated for half a second longer than he meant to. Then, muttering under his breath, he followed her inside. As Wednesday moved deeper into the cave, her boots crunched softly against the ground. Pale shapes littered the path ahead. Bones. Eugene slowed, his breath catching. He swallowed. Are those human bones? If they were, he had no desire for his bones to join them. Wednesday crouched and picked one up, turning it once in her hand. She studied the length, the curve, the bite marks. No, she said. Dear. Judging by the scoring, the monster prefers venison. Eugene exhaled shakily, only slightly reassured. She swept the flashlight beam across the wall and stopped. Metal glinted back at her. Chains. Heavy ones. Bolted into the stone. At their ends hung rusted handcuffs. Eugene frowned. That's weird. Why would there be cuffs in a place like this? Perhaps the monster enjoys restraint, he offered weakly. Wednesday didn't look at him. Her eyes traced the walls instead scratches, stains, the faint outlines of repeated movement. Patterns. No, she said finally. Every confirmed victim died at the scene. Organs removed. No abductions. No prolonged captivity. She stepped closer to the wall, running the light over the marks again. Which means these weren't used on victims. They served another purpose. She brushed her fingers over the claw marks etched into the cave wall. The shock hit instantly violent, invasive, unavoidable. Her head snapped back as the cave dissolved, sound collapsing into a hollow rush. Darkness folded inward. And the vision took her. Night. Wet earth beneath her knees. The smell of iron so thick it coated her tongue. She was kneeling. Ethan lay sprawled in the dirt, unnaturally still. His chest was torn open, a brutal cavity where his heart should have been. Blood soaked through his clothes, pooling beneath him. Her hands were shaking. One of them clutched his gold, slack, unresponsive. Ethan, she tried to say, but the name scraped out of her throat soundless. His eyes were half open, glassy, unfocused, already gone. A pressure crushed her chest. Not fear. Not panic. Something worse. Loss. Laughter followed. Low. Cruel. Wednesday lifted her head. Joseph Crackstone stood before her, pale and wrong, his skin stretched tight, his eyes burning with something that wasn't life. One wretched outcast is dead, he said, smiling. Next is Youthy, descendant of the Adams. She tried to move. She couldn't. The image cracked. Moonlight fractured into white, and the vision snapped apart. Wednesday gasped and staggered back, ripping her hand from the wall as reality slammed into place. The cave rushed back around her, damp stone and darkness. Eugene's startled voice muffled and distant. Wednesday, are you okay? Eugene asked, his voice tight in the dark. I'm fine, Wednesday said automatically. It was a lie. Every vision she'd had so far had come true. Every fragment, every warning. And if that pattern held, then the image burned into her mind had only one conclusion. Ethan was going to die. The thought lodged somewhere it shouldn't have, sharp and unwelcome. It made her chest feel constricted, irritate an unfamiliar reaction she had no interest in analyzing. I need to see him, she said abruptly, already turning toward the cave entrance. Eugene barely had time to react before she was moving past him. As she did, her gaze snagged on something caught against the stone, a single strand of hair, clinging to the rough wall near the claw marks. She stopped, reached out, and carefully pulled it free. Evidence. Wednesday closed her fist around it and headed back toward Nevermore, her pace faster than before. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 96, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 69, Chapter 69, Disappearance. At Nevermore, Wednesday moved quickly through the halls. Ethan's dorm room was empty, with no sign that he had been there. She checked the bathroom as well and found it empty. She turned and headed back toward Ophelia Hall. When she reached her own dorm room, the door was already open. Enid was stretched out on her bed, scrolling through her phone, and Thing sat on the desk beside Wednesday's typewriter, fingers resting still. Have either of you seen Ethan? Wednesday asked, getting straight to the point. Enid glanced up. No, I thought he was with you. Wednesday's gaze shifted to Thing. You. Thing's fingers paused. Then he snapped once, as if remembering, and hopped down from the table. He rummaged through a drawer, pulled out a thin file, and slid it across the desk. He signed quickly. He told me to give you this. This morning. Wednesday took the file and opened it. Photographs. Official records. The Gates family. Father, mother, son, daughter. All four listed as deceased. She flipped the page. The daughter's name appeared again, Laurel Gates, this time stamped status, alive. Beneath it was an address. A map. The Gates family house, marked clearly at the edge of Jericho. Wednesday's eyes narrowed. She turned another page. Typed notes filled the sheet. The Gates family are direct descendants of Joseph Crackstone. Their hatred for outcasts mirrors his systematic, obsessive, inherited. At the bottom, one final line stood alone. If you want answers, go to the Gates house. At night. Wednesday closed the file slowly. It seems he still has the energy to pull these kinds of pranks, she said, unimpressed despite the fact that she'd been worried about him minutes ago. Perhaps the vision wouldn't come true after all. And yet the Gates family didn't fit neatly into her investigation. The monster was an outcast, everything pointed to that. Not a normie. But then there was the vision. Joseph Crackstone, alive, walking, speaking, and now this, a Gates descendant officially declared dead, but very much alive. A connection was forming, jagged but persistent. Crackstone, the Gates bloodline, hatred preserved across generations. Wednesday looked up. Enid, she said, do you have any plans tonight? Enid blinked. No. Good. Be prepared. We're paying a house visit. Enid sat up straighter. At night. Whose house? She didn't know that Wednesday had relatives in Jericho, a family of psychopaths. Enid looked confused, unsure why they were going to such a dangerous place. Night settled over Jericho. The Gates family mansion loomed ahead of them, half hidden behind an iron fence choked with overgrown ivy. The house was large, old, and neglected, windows dark, paint peeling, the structure sagging as if it were tired of pretending to be alive. Enid stopped short. She stared at the tangled vines crawling up the stone walls, then at the house itself. Wednesday, are we sure we want to go in? She asked quietly. Because this looks like the kind of place where people disappear and become cautionary tales. Wednesday examined the structure, unimpressed. It's a house, Enid, not a myth. That's what people say before the myth happens. At least be grateful, Wednesday replied, pushing the gate open. If you die here, you'll be remembered as a ghost story. Immortality of a sort. Enid stared at her. That's not comforting. It wasn't meant to be. Wednesday stepped through the gate without hesitation. After a moment, Enid followed, uneasy, reluctant, but unwilling to be left alone. The door creaked as they entered the house, the sound echoing behind them. Wednesday swept the flashlight across the room. Every surface was layered with dust, thick enough to suggest the house had been abandoned for years. Nothing looked touched. Nothing lived here anymore. Then she lowered the beam to the floor. The dust was disturbed, clear footprints cutting through it. Recent. Someone was here before us, Wednesday said. Enid stiffened immediately and grabbed her hand. Before us, like recently. She whispered, is it a ghost? No, Wednesday replied without hesitation. Ghosts don't have mass. They don't leave footprints. She followed the trail with the light. This is either Humane or the monster which is currently terrorizing Jericho. Neither option comforted Enid. She stayed close as Wednesday moved forward, tracking the prints deeper into the house. The footsteps led them into a library. Tall shelves lined the walls, packed tight with old books, their spines dulled by dust and age. Cobwebs clung to the corners, and the air smelled stale, like paper that hadn't been disturbed in years. Wednesday scanned the room methodically. If someone had been here, they would have left a discrepancy. She stopped. One section of the bookshelf didn't match the rest. Most of the shelves were coated in dust, but one symbol carved into the side of a shelf was clean. Too clean. Without hesitation, she pressed it. A soft click echoed through the room. The bookshelf shuddered, then slid sideways, revealing a narrow compartment hidden behind it. Enid's breath caught. Of course there's a secret room. Inside was a crude altar, candles burned down to wax stubs, a painting of Joseph Crackstone, and dark writing smeared across the walls in dried blood. Fire will rain when I return. Enid took a step back. Okay, who doesn't have a spooky, blood-written altar hidden in their family library? Ours is in the living room, Wednesday said calmly. Better lighting. Enid stared at her. That's not reassuring. Wednesday leaned closer to the altar, studying the candles. Someone's been using this, Wednesday said. Recently. Behind her, Enid's voice cut off. Wednesday. Wednesday spun around. Enid. There was no response. Only Enid's flashlight lay on the floor behind her, rolling once before coming to a stop, its light aimed uselessly at the ceiling. Enid was gone. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 97, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 70, chapter 70, happy birthday. Enid, if you think this is some kind of prank, Wednesday said coolly, her voice steady despite the quiet stretching on, you can stop now. She paused, listening, hoping, just briefly, that this was Enid's idea of payback for being dragged here. No answer came. A thin crease formed between Wednesday's brows. This wasn't amusing anymore. She scanned the room with practiced precision, cataloging details the way she would a crime scene. Near the doorway, fresh footprints cut through the dust. These had to be the tracks connected to Enid's disappearance. She followed them down the corridor. They ended at a closed door. Wednesday stopped in front of the door, inhaled once, then slipped her hand into her pocket and unfolded her knife. She always carried it specifically for situations like this. It had been a while since she'd needed to use it, which she found mildly disappointing. She fixed her gaze on the door. Whatever waited on the other side, she hoped it would finally provide a reason. She opened the door. Surprise. Two voice for too cheerful collided with her expectations. Colored paper burst through the air, fluttering down around her like debris from a poorly planned explosion. Wednesday blinked. Once. Ethan stood grinning, wearing a black birthday cone hat that looked aggressively out of place on his head. Enid bounced beside him, eyes bright with barely contained excitement. Things sat on the table between them, also sporting a tiny black cone hat, fingers raised in a celebratory wiggle. For a moment, Wednesday simply stared. Her knife lowered a fraction. I was expecting a serial killer, she said flatly. Possibly a monster. This is worse. She would have preferred the earlier uneasy sensation of walking into the unknown over this quietly disappointing surprise. Enid beamed. Happy birthday, Wednesday. Ethan tilted his head, clearly amused. You should have seen your expression, he said, unable to hide his satisfaction. You actually thought someone had kidnapped Enid. Thing gave an enthusiastic thumbs up. Wednesday looked at the scattered paper on the floor, then at the hats, then back at them. Explain, she said flatly. Enid beamed. It's your birthday. I'm aware, Wednesday replied. So we planned this birthday party here, Ethan said, indicating the room. Thing helped. So you've been occupied with this all day? Wednesday asked. That explained his absentee and the sudden incompetence of her evening plans. No, Ethan said easily. I was wandering. Then Thing reminded me it was your birthday. He glanced at the hand. After that, this happened. If Thing told you it was my birthday, Wednesday said coolly, then he should have also mentioned that I despise birthdays. She folded her arms, her gaze steady, unamused. They commemorate survival, encourage forced enthusiasm, and mark the slow march toward decay, none of which I consider worthy of celebration. Wednesday glanced at the decorations as if they were evidence of a minor crime. Cake is a lie. Candles are a fire hazard. And the expectation that I smile on command is frankly insulting. This is officially the first time in my entire life that someone has reacted like this to a birthday surprise party, Enid said, blinking in disbelief. Most people don't immediately judge like this. Ethan shrugged. I mean, it's Wednesday. Expecting cheerful enthusiasm would have been a statistical error. Wednesday didn't dignify that with a response. She turned on her heel. Then I'm leaving. She made it exactly one step. Ethan shifted into her path, quick and annoyingly precise, gently but firmly steering her back toward the table. Not aggressive, just impossible to ignore. You've already been lured, kidnapped, and emotionally ambushed, he said. The least you can do is cut the cake. I would rather cut my own hand, Wednesday replied, her gaze dropping to the cake like it was a threat. It was dark chocolate flavored, dark frosting smooth and immaculate, the words Happy Birthday Wednesday written in stark white. There's time for self-harm later, Ethan said calmly. Cake first. Before she could step away again, he placed a kitchen knife into her hand, folding her fingers around the handle. His other hand guided her wrist toward the cake. This is coercion, Wednesday said flatly. It's friendship, Enid corrected, grinning. Very aggressive friendship. The knife pressed down. The cake gave way with a soft resistance. Happy birthday to Wednesday, Enid sang, completely off-key and proud of it. Ethan joined in without hesitation. Thing added enthusiastic signing, fingers flying with dramatic flair. Wednesday paused, the knife still embedded in the cake. Then the vision hit. Her head snapped back, breath catching as the room vanished. Darkness. A different air. Sharper. Colder. A woman stood ahead, her silhouette rigid, fingers wrapped tight around a shotgun. The metal gleamed under a single hanging light. So, dear, the woman said, voice steady with intent, you got the shotgun we needed. Someone stood beside Hurdle, close but their face refused to resolve, as if the vision itself were withholding it. Now, the woman continued, lifting the barrel slightly, I can finally kill that blood mosquito. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 98, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 71, Chapter 71, Laurel Gates. Wednesday, are you alright? Enid asked, watching her closely after the sudden movement. She couldn't understand why Wednesday had reacted like that, snapping her head back so abruptly, and it made her uneasy. Wednesday's head slowly returned to its usual stillness as the vision released its grip. Her expression settled back into calm neutrality, as if nothing had happened at all. I'm fine, Wednesday said. Her gaze slowly fell on the kitchen knife in her hand, source of the vision. Where did you get the knife? She asked. From the kitchen, Ethan replied. He didn't understand why the question mattered. Which kitchen? This house, Ethan said. Don't worry, I cleaned it. He gave a small shrug. He'd forgotten to bring one, so he'd taken it from the house kitchen instead. So what did you see in the vision? Ethan asked. His gaze flicked to the knife in her hand. It was from the Gates house. That alone made it suspect. Thornhill had lived there, he used that kitchen. If the vision had been triggered by the blade, then the past it carried mattered. He wondered if Wednesday had seen Laurel Gates, or something connected to her. If she'd finally uncovered Thornhill's real name. Nothing, Wednesday said. Then she corrected herself. Nothing new, but I got confirmation. She didn't elaborate. In her mind, the pieces had already aligned. The monster wasn't acting alone. There were two people connected to Itone Woman, one man, and it also seemed they were the ones who would kill Ethan. She could be certain of one thing, in the entirety of Nevermore, the title of blood-sucking mosquito fit Ethan better than any other vampire. The rest are normal, forgettable, uninteresting. Ethan, on the other hand, was loud, involved, and relentlessly annoying. And that woman in the vision wasn't just angry. She had a very specific, very personal hatred for him, and the voice familiar. She was certain she'd known that woman in the vision. The conclusion settled quickly, without drama. Laurel Gates wasn't dead. She was very much alive and planning something. Something methodical. Something obsessive. And whatever she was setting in motion involved resurrecting her psychopath ancestor. It also involved killing Ethan. Possibly her as well. She was pulled out of her thoughts when Ethan pinched off a small piece of cake and held it up, hovering it annoyingly close to her mouth. Now, Wednesday, he said lightly, say ah. She stared at the cake, then at his hand, then back at his face. Her expression didn't change, but the message was unmistakable. Do not push your luck. I strongly advise you to withdraw, she said coolly. Ethan paused, read the room, and immediately redirected. Right, consent acknowledged. He popped the cake into his own mouth instead. More for me. Wednesday watched him chew, unimpressed, as if filing the moment away for possible future retaliation. Before she could step back, Enid suddenly wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Okay, enough cake-related threats. Photo time. I do not consent to documentation, Wednesday replied flatly. That's fine, Enid said, already squeezing tighter. I do. Ethan lifted his camera, backing up a step to frame them. Alright, just smile. Wednesday turned her gaze toward the lens. She didn't smile. She didn't frown either. She simply looked like she was attending a funeral she'd personally arranged. Click. Ethan checked the screen. Wow, that's intense. It's my happy face, Wednesday said. Like that, Wednesday's surprise birthday ended unnecessarily. The next morning, she was already in the mayor's office. Mayor Walker looked up from his desk as Wednesday stood across from him, hands folded, posture rigid. I need to know what happened to Laurel Gates, Wednesday said, skipping every possible courtesy. The mayor blinked, clearly caught off guard. Laurel Gates. He repeated. Why are you asking about her? She's listed as deceased, Wednesday replied. Yet recent events suggest otherwise. Walker leaned back slightly. Laurel Gates died years ago. That's public record. Wednesday met his gaze without hesitation. So was Garrett Gates' cause of death. That didn't hold up very well either. Mayor Walker exhaled slowly, as if deciding how much truth to release. After Garrett Gates died, his family collapsed. His mother committed suicide. His father drank himself to death. Laurel Gates, their daughter, was placed in an overseas orphanage. He paused. The ship transporting her sank. She was presumed dead. Presumed, Wednesday repeated. She set a thin file on his desk and slid it forward. Not confirmed. Walker opened it. A childhood photograph stared back at him. Laurel Gates, eyes sharp even then. As he studied the image, something uneasy stirred. Recognition, faint but persistent. Wednesday watched his reaction closely. You've seen her. Walker's fingers stilled on the page. I might have, he said carefully. Recently. Then she isn't dead, Wednesday said. And if Laurel Gates is alive, she's connected to the murders in Jericho. Someone has been using Laurel Gates's room in the Gates house, Wednesday said evenly. I think it's her. Which means the sheriff should search the house properly. There's something there they haven't found yet. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 99, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 72, Chapter 72, Fester Adams. The mayor's response didn't satisfy her. He admitted it was strange that someone appeared to be using Laurel Gates' old room, but dismissed it as coincidence, perhaps a squatter, perhaps a homeless drifter. Jericho was stretched thin, he said. No manpower. No resources. No investigation. Wednesday had stopped listening halfway through. Authority had never been a prerequisite for truth. She continued on her own, and what she found confirmed her instincts. Photographs. Recent ones. Her. Ethan. Taken without their knowledge. Found in the Laurel Gates room. Wednesday studied them in silence. She murmured. Laurel Gates didn't just inherit her family name. She inherited their pathology. The conclusion settled cleanly into place. Laurel Gates was alive. Active. And she wasn't working alone. Someone inside Nevermore was helping her. Simeon close enough to feed information, movements, timing. And that collaborator was male, and he might be the monster she is searching for. Her thoughts narrowed, sharp and efficient. Xavier. He had drawn the monster in obsessive detail, its form, its posture, even its hideout. And each time, Xavier had been nearby, close enough to matter. Twice now, the creature had surfaced where Xavier already was, first at the Harvest Festival, then again at the old meeting house during Outreach Day. In both cases, he knew where exactly they would be. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Which meant there was only one reasonable conclusion: Xavier might be the monster. If Laurel Gates was the mind, then the monster was the muscle. And Xavier was beginning to look like muscle. Wednesday walked back toward Nevermore through the woods, her pace steady, expression unreadable. The trees pressed in close, branches whispering overhead. Things sat on her shoulder, fingers moving. You have no evidence. Yes, Wednesday replied coolly. That's what's currently preventing me from marching into the sheriff's office and throwing a homicidal monster into a cell. Bureaucracy is exhausting. But the problem is Laurel Gates, Wednesday said. She was intelligent enough to fake her death, resurface in Jericho under another identity, and somehow bend a monster to her will. Things fingers stilled, then signed again. Someone is following us. I'm aware, Wednesday said calmly. And they're doing a remarkably poor job of it. The snapping branches are a little on the nose. The footsteps behind her hesitated. Wednesday stopped. So, she said, turning at last, you can either reveal yourself now, or I can demonstrate several effective methods of forced disclosure. A figure stepped out from behind a tree, coat flaring dramatically. Wednesday. Fester announced, arms spread wide. You wound me, following my favorite niece through the woods, and this is the welcome I get. Thing brightened instantly, then launched himself off Wednesday's shoulder and punched Fester square in the face. Fester barely flinched. He blinked once, then grinned wider. Ah, still holding that grudge, I see. Thing signed furiously, all sharp gestures and emphatic flicks. It was one time, Fester said, rubbing his cheek, and I said I was sorry. Eventually. Wednesday allowed herself the smallest smile. Uncle Fester. He clasped his hands together, delighted. Look at you, stalking through the forest, brooding, unraveling conspiracies. You make the family proud. Thing hopped back onto Wednesday's shoulder, still glaring at Fester. He remembers, Wednesday said flatly. As he should, Fester replied cheerfully. Trauma builds character. Wednesday didn't return the smile. "What are you doing here, Uncle Fester?" she asked. "I doubt you traveled all this way out of familial concern." Fester placed a hand over his heart, mock-offended. Straight to suspicion. "I'm hurt." Then he leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I'm lying low. Occupational necessity." "Of course you are," Wednesday said. "Well," Fester continued brightly, "I heard from your father that Jericho is currently enjoying monster-related homicides, decades-old secrets clawing their way back to the surface, and a general sense of impending doom." He spread his arms, inhaling deeply. "What a perfect place for a quiet vacation." Thing signed something sharp and accusatory. Wednesday's eyes narrowed just a fraction. "Then you picked an excellent time. Things here are about to get significantly worse." Fester's grin widened. "Music to my ears." As they walked toward Nevermore, Fester glanced at her sideways. "So," he said, casual as ever, "how close are you to solving it?" "I found every missing piece except one," Wednesday replied. "The monster identity itself. There's no record of it in any Outcast texts." Fester hummed. "That's unusual. What does it look like?" Wednesday stopped. She reached into her bag, pulled out Xavier's painting, and handed it to him. Fester studied it for a moment. Then he smiled. "That's a hide." Wednesday froze. Her eyes lifted to his. "As in Jekyll and Hyde." "You've seen one before." "Oh yeah," Fester said cheerfully. "Back in '83. During my little vacation at the Zurich Institute for the Criminally Insane. That's where I got my first lobotomy." He shrugged. "You know lobotomies. Like tattoos. Hard to stop at one." Wednesday didn't react. "Tell me about the hide." "Ah, Olga Malakova." Fester clapped his hands once, delighted by the memory. She had it all. Beauty, brains, and a troubling fondness for necrophilia. Wednesday blinked once. "Go on." "Concert pianist," Fester continued, "until one night she transformed in the middle of a Chopin sonata, massacred a dozen audience members." He paused. "And 3 music critics. What triggered it?" Wednesday asked. "Emotion? Stress? Choice?" "No idea," Fester said. "I only saw her during group electroshock therapy." "There's never been any mention of hides in Outcast books," Wednesday said, irritation cutting through her otherwise even tone. "And Nevermore claims to have the largest collection of Outcast information in existence." That fact alone made her angry. An entire Outcast type unrecorded, undocumented, unstudied. And she finds ignorance far more offensive than malice. He tilted his head at her. "Have you checked Nathaniel Faulkner's diary?" Wednesday's gaze sharpened. "No," she said. "But I will." A/N The Patreon version is already updated to chapter 100, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 73, Chapter 73, The Finale, 1. That evening, Wednesday slipped into the Nightshade Society hideout alone. The place was quiet in the way secrets prefer, sealed, deliberate, waiting. Nathaniel Faulkner's diary was kept here. Founder of Nevermore. Archivist of truths people have decided to forget. She stopped just inside the chamber. "Uncle Fester," she said evenly. "You were supposed to be ahead of me." A pause. Then a figure eased out of the shadows. "Fashionably late," Fester replied, pleased with himself. "Sneaking is more fun when someone's watching." "So where is the safe?" Wednesday asked, already scanning the walls. Fester hummed thoughtfully. Let me remember." He studied the painting's somber portraits, stern ancestors, eyes that followed you just enough to be irritating. He stopped in front of one, tilted his head, then grinned. "This one's lying." He lifted the frame aside. Behind it, set neatly into the stone, was a steel safe. "That diary should be in here," Fester said, pressing his ear against the door. Wednesday watched as his fingers hovered over the dial. He listened, adjusted, listened again, patient, intimate, like the safe was telling him a secret. Click, click. From the ease of the casual tilt of his head, the relaxed patience he could tell this wasn't rare for him. It was routine, almost comforting. Another subtle turn. Click. Then, finally, a soft mechanical sigh. The safe door swung open. Inside lay a single, weathered book, leather bound, edges worn, the name Nathaniel Faulkner pressed faintly into the cover. Wednesday took the book and opened it, skimming past centuries of cramped handwriting until a particular symbol caught her eye. She slowed. Hide. According to Nathaniel Faulkner, hides were among the most dangerous outcasts ever documented. They were born of outcast mutations. Their transformation was triggered, not inherited in the traditional sense. A hide only emerged after severe emotional trauma, often awakening under chemical inducement or hypnosis. That was the most disturbing part. They bonded with a master, one who unlocked them. Once awakened, a hide obeyed that person completely, carrying out commands without question. Violence, murder, destruction, it was all an extension of the master's will. In human form, a hide could live undetected for years. No physical signs, no records, nothing that distinguished them from any other outcast or normie. So Laurel Gates is the master of the hide, Wednesday muttered. That explains why the monster was carrying out her orders. After that, she stepped outside and immediately saw the commotion. Students were moving in the same direction, voices low, clustered and uneasy. Not panic, not excitement, something tighter than both. Wednesday followed without hesitation. The courtyard came into view. The grass was scorched into clean, deliberate lines, the smell of smoke still hanging in the air. The words hadn't been scratched or painted, they were burned deep into the ground. Fire will rain. The embers glowed faintly as evening settled over the courtyard, leaving no doubt this wasn't a prank. Wednesday studied the scorched message, recognition settling in. She'd seen the same warning at the Gates mansion. This wasn't a coincidence. It appears she's done concealing herself, Wednesday said coolly. The message wasn't a mistake or a slip, it was a challenge. A deliberate provocation. Catch me if you can. The message burned itself into her mind long after the crowd dispersed. She headed back to her dorm, already piecing together the implications. The moment she opened the door, she froze. There was a familiar smell in the room that shouldn't be in the room. Thing? She asked. No response. Her eyes swept the room again. Nothing looked disturbed at first. Then she saw its oil, scattered across the wooden floor in a thin, careless trail. Belladonna, Wednesday said quietly. The smell clicked into place. She knew it well. Potent. Toxic. Strong enough to induce unconsciousness if inhaled long enough. Which raised a far more troubling question: was it in her room? Her gaze shifted to the desk. A single sheet of paper lay there, placed deliberately. Not hidden. Not rushed. Waiting. Her name was written at the top. Wednesday picked it up and read. If you want your werewolf friend, come to Joseph Crackstone's crypt on Raven Island alone. Her expression didn't change, but something cold settled behind her eyes. Then, without warning, a vision seized her. Wednesday found herself standing before Joseph Crackstone's crypt. Goody appeared beside it. There's no time, Goody said. Crackstone is close to returning. You have to stop him. Wednesday frowned. He's dead. How does a dead man return, and why is this my responsibility? Because I bound his soul with a curse and sealed him in that coffin, Goody replied. Now one of his descendants is breaking it. The seal is failing. But he was a normie, Wednesday said. What threat could he be to the outcasts? He won't return as a human, Goody said. What rises will be something else. Something dangerous for every outcast. Wednesday's jaw set. Then how do I kill him? Goody's voice lowered. You strike through his black heart. 74, Chapter 74, the finale, 2. The vision broke. Wednesday stood in the dim stillness of her room, her breathing calm and controlled. On any other night, she would have dismissed the message outright, a trap so obvious only a fool would rush toward it. And yet, she was considering doing exactly that. The realization displeased her. Recklessness was not her habit, but the thought lingered anyway, unwelcome and persistent. Perhaps Enid's influence was to blame. Prolonged exposure to optimism and impulsive bravery had a way of eroding one's better judgment. Another image surfaced unbidden: Ethan's body, motionless, lying in a pool of blood. Goody's warning followed immediately. The moment of Crackstone's revival was drawing closer. And if the vision was to be believed, that meant Ethan's death was also nearing. She turned and left the room, heading straight for Ethan's dorm. When she opened the door, he wasn't there. Instead, she saw Things sitting on the table, waiting. What are you doing here? Wednesday asked, stopping short. Things' fingers moved quickly. I saw the note. I went to find Ethan to ask for help. He wasn't there. That was confirmation enough. Let's go, she said, certain now of who had taken Enid and where they would be headed next. Minutes later, the shoreline of Raven Island emerged from the darkness. The night air was cold, the water restless. She crossed and stopped before Joseph Crackstone's crypt, its stone face pale under the moonlight. She knelt briefly, eyes level with Thing. You wait, she said. Move only when it matters. Thing nodded once and vanished into the darkness. Wednesday rose, facing the crypt alone. If Crackstone was returning, she would be there to greet him. She stepped into the crypt. Stone steps descended into darkness as she entered the underground grave of one of the most infamous psychopaths in history. Then, boom, the sound ripped through the chamber, deafening in the enclosed space. A flash of fire. Then, directly in front of her, a falling body entered her vision. It came down slowly. Too slowly. Blood lifted into the air as it fell, breaking apart mid-drop, hanging for a fraction of a second before coming down in uneven splashes. Thud. The body hit the stone near her foot. Wednesday froze. Her eyes dropped. Blood was already spreading across the floor, dark against the pale stone, pouring from a single, brutal wound in the chest. It widened as it pooled, creeping toward her shoes. Ethan. Her vision from earlier slammed into place with brutal precision. Same position, same stillness, same impossible silence after the violence. For a fraction of a second, her mind refused to accept it. Then reality caught up. The blood kept moving. He didn't. Wednesday knelt beside him, fingers hovering just above his wrist, not touching yet as if contact would make it final. This was supposed to be preventable, she said quietly. So, a voice said lightly, amused, even you can show that kind of emotion, Adams. Wednesday lifted her head. A boy stood a few steps away, with a shotgun still raised. Beside him was Marilyn Thornhill. Laurel Gates, Wednesday said, her voice steady now. The pieces locked into place. The smell in her room. Belladonna. Strong enough to render someone unconscious. Few people at Nevermore had access to it. Fewer still knew how to use it without killing the subject. And fewer still could move through Ophelia Hall without raising suspicion. A dorm mother could. A teacher could. Someone who belonged. She also had enough knowledge of plant poisons to use them to awaken the hide. You always were observant, Laurel said. It's why you were a problem. Wednesday's eyes flicked once to the body on the floor, then back to Laurel. So you hid in plain sight, she said. Changed your name. Changed your role. Raised a monster and pointed it where you wanted. Control requires patience, Laurel replied. Something you and I both understand. Wednesday straightened slowly, her face unreadable again. The shock was gone. What remained was focus. And Enid? She asked. Laurel's smile sharpened as she motioned toward Enid, unconscious on the stone floor. I had to, Laurel snapped, her voice cracking with something wild beneath it. She was the weakness for both of you. Without her, I never could have made that monster bleed. Her gaze dropped to the body at Wednesday's feet. And now, she went on, almost triumphant, look at him, dead. Her composure finally collapsed into raw hatred. That damn outcast, Laurel spat. Do you know how many times he looked at me like I was nothing? Like he was superior. Her hands shook not from fear, but rage. How dare an outcast do that to me, she screamed, to someone of Crackstone lineage. Wednesday rose in one sharp motion. The knife flashed in her hand, her intent clean and precise. She lunged straight for Laurel's throat. Something intercepted her. A massive hand closed around her wrist mid-strike and hurled her aside. She hit the stone hard, the breath knocked from her lungs, the knife skittering away across the floor. The height stood between them now. Wednesday pushed herself up just enough to see it clear life bulk, the unnatural posture, the thing that had once been human. Her gaze slid past it, to Laurel. Laurel smiled. Don't worry, she said, almost gently. He won't be alone for long. She gestured toward the coffin behind her. When my ancestor Joseph Crackstoner returns, you'll join him. Wednesday's eyes flicked once more to the body on the floor. Then back to Laurel. Then to the hide. For the first time, the possibility surfaced cold and unwelcome, that this might be where her story ends. 15 minutes earlier. Before Ethan's present condition. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 102, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 75, Chapter 75, the finale, 3. Fire will rain, Ethan murmured, studying the words as they continued to burn, flames tracing each letter with deliberate persistence. He skewered a marshmallow, holding it over the fire. At least it's functional, he said to no one in particular. Nothing like threat doubling as a campfire. He snapped a quick selfie flames behind him, the warning half visible, and typed a message. Enid, come admire this. Fire-based art installation. Send. He waited. A minute passed. Nothing. Ethan frowned. Enid never ignored messages. Not during class. Not during meals. The only times she went dark were sleep or a show ran it was still early evening. That's weird. He hovered over the call button, then shook his head. She'd respond when she saw it. The marshmallow finally blackened. Ethan popped it into his mouth, chewing thoughtfully, eyes drifting back to the burning words. As he stared into the fire, chewing thoughtfully, a hand landed on his shoulder. Ethan turned. Eugene. He glanced down and nudged the marshmallow bag near his feet with his shoe. Want one? No, Eugene said quickly. He didn't even look at the bag. His eyes kept flicking back to the burning words carved into the grass. Fire will rain. The glow reflected uneasily on his face. Whoever had done this had gone far beyond a prank, and Eugene was creeped out by it. Your bad luck, Ethan shrugged, taking another bite. There was an awkward pause before Ethan looked back at him. So what do you want from me? Eugene then reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded note. Miss Thornhill asked me to give you this. After that he didn't wait around and turned and left. Ethan unfolded the paper. His pupils flared, a dangerous glow igniting as he read. I have your girlfriend. If you want to see her alive, come to Crackstone's crypt alone. Or say goodbye. The paper crumpled in his fist. The muscles in his hand knotted, veins standing out sharply. That bitch, Ethan growled under his breath. Of all the lines Laurel Gates could have crossed, this was the one. Enid. He had underestimated or assumed she'd wait for the blood moon, assumed she'd savor the ritual. Instead, she'd gone straight for leverage. That was his mistake. He had underestimated her psychopathic nature. He stared into the fire, jaw tight, eyes burning brighter. Looks like it's time you reunited with your family, he muttered. He tossed the note into the flames. The paper curled, blackened, and vanished. Ethan stepped into the underground chamber of the crypt and he immediately noticed the situation. Enid was right there. Laurel Gates had one arm locked around her, holding her upright, the other hand raised with a syringe poised dangerously close to Enid's neck. The liquid inside shimmered faintly. Nightshade. Even a trace would be enough. To the side, Tyler stood with a shotgun braced against his shoulder, the barrel already trained on Ethan's chest. Laurel smiled. Careful, she said softly, savoring the moment. If you move even an inch, this needle goes in. You know what Nightshade does. Seconds, and she's gone. Ethan's gaze flicked to the syringe, then to Enid's face, pale, unconscious, helpless. Something in him snapped. I told you, he said quietly, his voice low and vibrating with restraint, never to cross that line. His eyes ignite, dread spreading outward from his pupils, veins crawling like cracks through marble. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. Laurel laughed, sharp and pleased. And what if I did? She taunted. You can't do anything now. I'm holding your weakness. One push, one twitch of my finger, and she dies. Ethan took a single step forward. Try it, he said, teeth bared. The moment that needle pierces her skin, you'll beg me to kill you. What I'll do instead will make death feel merciful. For a heartbeat, Laurel hesitated, then masked it with cruelty. Oh, I'm not killing her, she said. I'm killing you. That's why I waited. That's why I played patient. She turned her head slightly. Tyler, dear, aim for his heart. Tyler's grin spread as he adjusted his stance, the shotgun locking firmly on target. Guns. Ethan laughed softly. Disappointing. You should have brought your father instead. His aim's better than yours. Tyler's smile froze and turned to anger. Last time, Ethan went on, voice cutting, I beat you bloody even when you were in your monster form. Now you're hiding behind firearms like a scared little boy. He leaned forward just enough to make the threat unmistakable. Pathetic. Ethan's gaze stayed locked on Tyler. Why don't you hide behind your sheriff daddy while you're at it? Tyler's face twisted with rage. He hated remembering the last time, when he'd been in monster form, drunk on his own strength, convinced he was unstoppable. And still, he'd been beaten. Thoroughly. That humiliation had never left him. Now it was happening again. Even with a gun in his hands, even with the upper hand, the confidence on Ethan's face made Tyler feel small. It wasn't fear he saw there. It was contempt. The same look as before, calm, unflinching, looking down on him. He wasn't just angry. He was desperate to erase that look. Laurel sucked in a sharp breath. The syringe hovered closer to Enid's neck, liquid inside trembling. Don't move. Her warning cut the air. She edged the needle forward another centimeter. Now, dear, Laurel said softly, almost singing. Shoot him. Tyler's grin spread. Smile while you can, Ethan replied, voice calm, edged with steel. The last one to smile will be me. Bang! The blast thundered through the crypt. The shotgun shells tore straight into his chest, punching through flesh with a wet thud. A jagged hole opened where they hit, blood bursting out as the force hurled him backward. His body hit the floor. Breath flooded his lungs, HNN sound draining into a distant ring. Blood spilled fast, SPLAS dark against the stone. Vision blurring, edges tunneling, he caught one last image through the haze. Wednesday, with an expression he had never seen. Well, this turned into a mess. Silence swallowed the chamber. Laurel released Enid Dropan. She crumpled to the floor, unmoving, as the echo of the gunshot faded into nothing. 76, Chapter 76, Joseph Crackstone, 1. Wednesday shifted against the restraints as blood seeped from the gash on her forehead, sliding through her hair and dripping down the side of her face. The hide's strength had been overwhelming. Gone brutal throw had been enough to leave her injured, but her stare remained steady. Her eyes tracked the candles circling the sarcophagus, methodical even now. So what is this? She asked coolly. A ritual to resurrect your psychopathic ancestor? Or are the candles purely decorative? Laurel didn't react to Wednesday's sarcasm. She set another jar down inside, organs floated in preservative, unmistakably taken from her victims. No prayers, Laurel said. I have a better plan. Wednesday's gaze moved from jar to coffin. Serial murder as a family tradition. How touching. Joseph Crackstone was a great man, Laurel said, smiling at Wednesday. He protected normies from outcasts. He was meant for more. He was robbed of the life he deserved. Wednesday met her gaze without blinking. I'm sure history is full of people who said the same thing about monsters, she replied. Hitler, for example. Laurel's smile vanished. Don't you dare compare my ancestor to that madman, she snapped. Crackstone was a hero. He protected normies from creatures like you. And now, she continued, her voice sharpening, with your help, he will return. My help? Wednesday echoed, genuinely puzzled. Her eyes flicked past Laurelto, the boy standing nearby. The Hyde, responsible for every murder in Jericho. So her earlier assumption had been wrong. Xavier wasn't the monster after all. Laurel noticed the shift and smiled. Your ancestor, Goody Adams, killed Crackstone, she said calmly. But she didn't stop there. She cursed his soul. Bountytan sealed it inside the sarcophagus so he would remain trapped forever. Wednesday looked back at the stone coffin, then at Laurel. Goody did the right thing, she said evenly. A psychopath like Crackstone didn't deserve an afterlife, only containment. Even now, you cling to your arrogance, Laurel said coolly. But I'm in a generous mood, so I'll indulge you. She lifted an old, leather-bound book. Unlike my father and brother, who relied on blind hatred to hunt outcasts, I believe in magic. And I found a way to exterminate them, be resurrecting the man who nearly succeeded the first time. Wednesday's eyes narrowed. Goody's Book of Shadows. Yes. Laurel's smile returned, almost reverent. Everything I needed was inside. A ritual to break the seal, but it requires blood. Adam's blood on the night of blood moon. You have no idea how pleased I was when you enrolled at Nevermore, Laurel said. She stopped, then smiled to herself. Actually, fate favored me. A brief pause. The blood moon wasn't supposed to arrive yet. Her eyes gleamed. But fate was generous. It came early. Wednesday looked at Laurel, fully aware that luck wasn't on her side. She understood the plan in its entirety, yet, for the moment, there was nothing she could do. Tyler. He stepped toward Wednesday. Hypocrisy, Wednesday said coolly. You despise monsters, yet you don't hesitate to use one. Laurel didn't respond. Tyler released the restraints. Wednesday barely had time to register the freedom before his hand closed around her arm. She fought back, precise, efficient movements, but it was useless. He was stronger than he looked. Stronger than before. He dragged her across the stone floor toward the sarcophagus. Candles shuddered as they passed, their flames wavering. Glass jars lined the walls, organs suspended inside, catching the firelight like unblinking eyes. Above them, moonlight poured through the fractured glass ceiling. Laurel tilted her head, watching the sky. Now, she said softly. It's time. She moved without hesitation. Steel flashed. Pain erupted sharp, blinding as Laurel sliced across Wednesday's arm and forced it down onto the stone lid. Blood spilled onto the carved surface. The symbols ignited instantly. Light flared. The ritual had begun. Wednesday gasped as the sarcophagus responded. The stone drank. Her blood was pulled from the wound, drawn into the carvings in thin, glowing lines. Laurel stepped back, breath hitching, eyes alight with triumph, and motioned Tyler to go away. It's working, she whispered. She opened Goody's book, its pages rustling as if alive, and began to chant. One by one, the jars lit up. The organs inside pulsed, shadows writhing against the glass. Smoke bled from the symbols etched into the floor, curling upward, wrapping the sarcophagus in a dark spiral. Wednesday gritted her teeth and yanked her arm free. She stumbled back, barely catching herself as the pain surged. She looked up. The symbols were complete now. The air vibrated, thick and charged. From within the stone coffin came a sound low, grinding, unmistakable. Movement. Laurel stared at it, reverent and shaking. He's coming back. Wednesday's gaze flicked between Laurel and the sarcophagus. Then she heard it. A faint sound behind hair wet, dragging, wrong. She turned. The blood pooled around Ethan's body began to move slow at first, then with purpose crawling back toward him as if drawn by an unseen force. Before her eyes, his legs jerked once, twice then lifted from the ground. His spine arched sharply as his body hauled itself upright, twitching, resisting gravity like it was an inconvenience rather than a law. The wound in his chest pulsed. Blood streamed back into it, flesh pulling together, sealing over bone and muscle in a chilling, deliberate motion. Fully healed. Ethan stood fully upright. He rolled his neck slowly, bones snapping back into place. Wednesday's breath caught. Her eyes widened, then relief curved into a faint, unexpected smile. The sarcophagus lid shifted. A crack split it open, and black smoke poured out, thick and alive, crawling across the chamber ceiling. From within it, a figure emerged, twisted, inhuman. Pale skin stretched tight over the bone in pilgrim clothes. A staff struck the ground once, echoing like a verdict. Joseph Crackstone had risen. At the same moment, a sharp crack sounded behind her. She assumed Wednesday was making a futile attempt. There was nothing she could do now. Her ancestor was fully awakened. But when Laurel turned, she saw something that terrified her. The dead body was rising. Impossible, she whispered. She had killed him, she was certain of it. No outcast should have survived that. What kind of monster is he? Then his words came back to her. He had promised to make her fate worse than death. Ethan's eyes snapped open. Red, not glowing, completely flooded with blood, swallowing the whites whole. Laurel took a step back, fear tightening her chest. Crackstone turned toward him. The first thing he saw upon resurrection was an outcast, and the sight deeply offended him. Filth, Crackstone spat, staring at the abomination before him. Ethan tilted his head slightly. Yeah, he said calmly. You're filthy. No need to announce it. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 104, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 77, Chapter 77, Joseph Crackstone, 2. Then Ethan saw it. Laurel was retreating, step by careful step, edging toward Enid's unmoving body. Each movement was calculated, deliberate. Her hand slid into her pocket, fingers curling around something hidden from sight. She was going to use Enid again, turn her into a shield. Ethan's eyes narrowed, the realization hitting instantly. Do you think I'm blind? He said. He snapped his fingers. Laurel was ripped off her feet and slammed hard into the ceiling, the impact driving the breath from her lungs. At the same time, Enid's body was wrenched free, pulled cleanly through the air. Wednesday caught her instinctively, arms tightening around Enid as she stumbled back a step, keeping her upright. Laurel hit the floor in a broken heap, gasping, her plan shattered in a single motion. He hadn't used it earlier for one reason alone. The needle had been too close to Enid's neck. Even the slightest force, a fraction of a second mistimed, and the poison would have gone in. He wouldn't gamble with her life, not even for certainty. Now the distance was gone. So was Laurel's leverage. Crackstone turned his attention fully to Wednesday, his gaze sharp with old, inherited hatred. Laurel's muffled groans from the floor didn't earn so much as a glance. Why would they? He had never cared for his allies. He is the biggest self-centered asshole you can find. Even the one who had resurrected him was already irrelevant. To him, she was expendable. I am of your blood, Laurel said, forcing the words out through the pain. I summoned you to rid the world of outcasts once and for all. And he is the major obstacle. She pointed at Ethan, spite still burning in her eyes. She was shaking, barely able to stand, but stubborn enough to keep clinging to her revenge. Pain meant nothing to her now. What Laurel didn't understand, what she had never understood, was that her hero was a self-centered asshole. Crackstone lifted his staff, his hollow gaze locking onto her. Goody Adams, he intoned. You haunt me still. You will suffer the same fate you bequeathed me. Ethan didn't flinch. He shifted closer, steadying Wednesday when he noticed the blood at her hairline. Bold speech for someone who still has to touch us first, he said flatly. Then, quieter, to her, you standing, or do you want a medical break? Wednesday wiped the blood away with the back of her hand, unimpressed. No, I'm far more interested in dismantling this ancestor-descendant partnership. Good, Ethan said. He lifted Enid effortlessly, settling her onto his back, protective even now. Metal shrieked. A sword tore free from the crypt wall, slicing through the air and landing perfectly in Wednesday's grasp. She didn't question it. She never did. Crackstone's face twisted with rage. You dare ignore me? He roared, staff slamming down. You shall burn in hellfire. Wednesday tightened her grip on the sword, ice cold, focused. History lesson, she said. You don't scare me. Crackstone slammed his staff into the stone. Fire tore up from the ground in a violent ring, flames spiraling outward and sealing the crypt in a blazing circle. Heat rolled through the chamber. Laurel screamed once, then scrambled backward, dragging herself behind the sarcophagus as embers rained down. Ethan reacted instantly. His hand snapped up, power flaring, and an invisible barrier curved around them. The fire crashed against it, splitting and curling away like water against glass. For a moment, Crackstone saw only flames. Then, movement. A pressure shift at his right. Ethan burst through the fire, red lightning crawling over his skin, his foot already rising fast, brutal, aimed straight for Crackstone's face. Crackstone blocked just in time. Staff met strike. The impact detonated in a sharp shockwave, fire ripping apart around them, stone dust blasting outward. Crackstone didn't stumble. He smiled. Is that all? He sneered. You forgot something, Ethan said calmly. From the left, steel sang. Wednesday came out of the smoke, sword arcing clean and precise toward Crackstone's chest. No hesitation. No fear. Crackstone snarled and unleashed a telekinetic blast. The force slammed into both of them. Ethan hit the ground first, boots skidding across stone, but he twisted midfall, catching Wednesday instinctively, absorbing the impact with his body. He landed hard, still on his feet. Enid clung to his back. Wednesday was in his arms. For a heartbeat, everything stilled except the fire. Ethan exhaled slowly. He's stronger than I expected. That kick had carried almost his full power, laced with blood lightning, but he hadn't expected Crackstone's body to be nearly as strong as his own. Yes, Wednesday said, already adjusting her grip on the sword. And fighting him in a confined space will be inefficient. Crackstone raised his staff again, flames coiling tighter. Wednesday's eyes flicked toward the stairway, then back to the monster. So we don't. Ethan stepped backward, deliberate, calculating, drawing Crackstone's attention, his rage. Outside, he said. And Crackstone, furious and arrogant, followed. Where do you think you're running, spawn of filth? He thundered, his voice rolling through the crypt as fire crawled after him. You will keep burning in hellfire until judgment is complete. They burst out of the crypt into the woods. Crackstone followed, stopping just beyond the entrance. He looked around at the trees, the darkness, the open ground, and sneered. You are unchanged, he said, his voice heavy with old venom. In my time, you hid in forests like vermin. You still run. You still cower. He raised his staff, embers crawling along its length. You think this wilderness will save you? I will drown it in hellfire and drag you back for judgment. Before he could take another step, a tree tore free from the ground. Roots ripped out in a spray of dirt, the trunk wrenching sideways through the air and slamming into Crackstone with crushing force. Crack boom. The impact hurled him through brush and stone, bark exploding, the ground shuddering as he disappeared into the woods. Ethan lowered his hand. No, he said evenly. Who says we're hiding? We're just deciding where you'll die. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 105, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 78, Chapter 78, Ugly Death. On Thing's side, he stood in front of Weem's desk, hands moving rapidly as he signed. Weems watched him with a tightening expression, irritation clear on her face. She had never been fluent in sign language, and whatever Thing was trying to convey was coming too fast, too fragmented. Only after a moment, when his gestures slowed and repeated, did the meaning begin to sink in. What are you saying? Wednesday is in danger, and one of the teachers kidnapped Enid? Weems asked, her tone sharp now. Thing tapped emphatically, repeating the gesture until it was unmistakable. Weems straightened, irritation slowly giving way to concern. She didn't understand half of what Wednesday was usually up to, but this much was undeniable. One of her students was missing, another was in danger, and a member of her staff was involved. She could dismiss it as just another one of Wednesday's antics, but if Wednesday was right, truly right, then the damage would be catastrophic. That was not something she could afford to ignore. Where are they? Weems asked again. Thing signed carefully this time, slower. Raven Island. The crypt. On Ethan's side, he stood with a massive tree ripped clean from the ground. In front of him, Crackstone stepped out of the wreckage, robe scorched, staff intact, body completely uninjured. Ethan exhaled slowly. Wow, super durable. That's irritating. Good, he was clear, Wednesday said, steady despite the chaos. The heart. It has to be the heart. Crackstone lifted his staff, eyes burning as they locked onto Wednesday. So, he said, voice echoing with old venom, the raven still hides behind monsters and tricks. Just like your ancestor. The ground shuddered as he slammed the staff down. A wave of force tore through the clearing, sending debris and broken branches flying. Ethan dug his heels in, absorbing the impact. He talks a lot for a walking corpse. Crackstone sneered. You are an abomination, both of you. Errors that should have been erased centuries ago. His gaze returned to Wednesday. I ended your kind once. I will enjoy doing it again. He thrust his staff forward. Fire ripped through the air toward them. Ethan swung the uprooted tree like a shield, flames exploding on impact. Splinters flew, embers scattering across the forest floor. The forest ignited around them, flames crawling up tree trunks and racing through fallen leaves, turning the clearing into a ring of fire. Ethan didn't take his eyes off Crackstone. I'll keep him busy, he said evenly. You know when to go for the heart. Good, Wednesday replied, already shifting her stance. Ethan launched forward. Red lightning wrapped his arm as he drove a punch straight toward Crackstone's chest, fast, brutal, meant to end it. Crackstone reacted instantly, snapping his staff up to block. The impact cracked the air, energy flaring between fist and wood. Crackstone laughed, low and cruel. Useless. This body is beyond death. You cannot kill what no longer lives. He twisted the staff and swung it toward Ethan's throat. Ethan caught it mid-arc. The ground groaned under the force as he planted his feet. Muscles tightened. With a sharp pull, he ripped Crackstone off balance, lifting him clean off the ground like dead weight. Wrong, Ethan said quietly. He slammed Crackstone down. The impact shook the forest floor, dirt and embers exploding outward as Crackstone hit hard, the earth cratering beneath him. Flames wavered. Trees shuddered. Ethan didn't let go. He hauled Crackstone up again, muscles coiling for the next slam. But the staff flared. A burst of fire ripped outward, forcing Ethan to release and leap back as heat scorched the air where he'd been standing. Crackstone staggered, boots skidding through ash, trying to regain his balance. He didn't get the chance. Ethan's hand snapped up. Invisible force crushed down on Crackstone mid-step, yanking him off the ground and locking him in place. Crackstone thrashed, staff vibrating, flames sputtering as his limbs froze against the pressure. Ethan's eyes burned red. Wednesday now. Wednesday moved the moment he shouted. No pause. No doubt. She sprinted straight at Crackstone, sword low, grip tight. Fire snapped around her boots, but she didn't slow. Crackstone twisted toward her, staff rising. Too late. She drove the blade forward with brutal precision, straight into his chest. The sword punched through decayed flesh and bone and buried itself in the black heart. Crackstone screamed not in pain, but in raw fury. The flames around them wavered. His body split with glowing fractures, light leaking through as Ethan released his hold. Crackstone staggered, staring down at the blade impaling him. No, he rasped, voice cracking. I cannot, I was chosen, I was eternal. Wednesday stepped closer. She twisted the blade. Crackstone's scream turned desperate. No, I will not die. The sound cut off. His body collapsed inward, breaking apart into ash and burning cinders that scattered across the scorched ground. Silence followed as the fire was extinguished almost immediately. What the hell is going on here? Weem's shout cut through the clearing as she arrived just as Wednesday delivered the final blow. She froze, not understanding how Crackstone was even alive. He was supposed to be dead. What the hell was going on here? Wednesday straightened, expression unchanged. This, she said evenly, is exactly what I've been trying to tell you. She turned to face Weems fully. The monster was never just a monster. It was planning something. A trace of satisfaction crossed her face. And this is that something. For once, the woman who had always called her delusional had no answer. Laurel crawled out of the crypt, teeth clenched in fury as she saw that Crackstone had been killed. But she didn't care. Not really. She had already prepared for this. Laurel had a backup plan. Tyler would finish it. If things hadn't gone as planned, she had already given the order. Tyler was to massacre the students of Nevermore. One way or another, the outcasts would pay. Then the air shifted. Ethan was suddenly in front of her. She didn't even have time to react. The world snapped sideways, trees streaked past and then impact. Her back slammed into a trunk hard enough to crack bark. Pain exploded through her spine. She slid down, gasping, useless. He stepped closer, eyes glowing, veins dark and alive beneath his skin. When his fangs slid free, there was no rush, just certainty. I'm really hungry, Ethan said quietly. Your little stunt caused more damage than you realized. Normally, blood wasn't necessary. Human food was enough. But the forced healing had drained him. Now he needed human blood urgently, or he would lose control and descend into a berserk vampiric state. The signs were already there, impossible to ignore. He was a vampire, after all. And he had already promised that bitch she would die a painful, ugly death. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 106, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon. 79, Chapter 79, Wolfing Out. After some time, Ethan wiped the last smear of blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. His gaze dropped to Laurel's body slumped against the tree. What was left of her? Skin drawn tight, hollowed, colorless, drained until she looked less human and more like a relic pulled from a tomb. Dry, brittle, empty. He tilted his head, studying the result with mild disappointment. Poor thing, he said quietly. I did warn you not to test my patience. No pulse, no warmth, nothing left to take. He exhaled through his nose, eyes still faintly glowing. All that hatred, he added, almost amused, and not a drop worth keeping. Now what should I do with your body? Ethan muttered. He glanced down at what remained of her, weighing the options. Leaving it wasn't smart. Too many questions, too many loose ends. Fire erased those. Lightning gathered in his palm, sharp and controlled. He released it. The husk ignited instantly, flames consuming it fast, clean, nothing left that could point back to him. To anyone who found the aftermath, it would look simple, accidental, final. Then, a howl cut through the woods. Ethan froze. Ha! He turned slowly, eyes lifting to the sky. The moon hung low and swollen, red as a fresh wound. Blood moon. Realization hit hard. Enid. The timing snapped into place with sick precision. This was the very night Enid wolfed out in the original plot. She wolfed out, he said under his breath. He followed the sound through the trees until he spotted her. A werewolf stood in the clearing, fur catching the moonlight, soft, pale, with streaks of pastel color still clinging to her hair even in this form. Ethan stopped, a slow smile pulling at his face. Well, he said lightly, relief threading his voice, you did it. The werewolf's ears perked up. She let out a short, excited sound and padded closer, tail swishing. She tried to speak, a jumble of sounds coming out as soft howls instead. Ethan blinked. Right, still a language barrier. He tilted his head. Are you happy? Terrified? Both. She shook her head quickly. Nothan braced herself. Bones shifted, light rippling across her skin, and seconds later Enid stood there again, human, shaking, very aware of one critical problem. She crossed her arms over herself instantly, face burning red. Turn around. She snapped. Ethan didn't argue. He turned so fast he nearly tripped. Already done. Completely not looking. There was frantic movement behind him. Leaves crunching. A muffled groan of embarrassment. This was not how I imagined my first wolf out, Enid muttered, staring at the ground. Why am I even in the woods? The last thing I remember was being in my room. Ethan let out a slow breath and shrugged out of his coat, holding it out behind him without turning around. Long story. Use this first, preferably before you die of second-hand embarrassment. She grabbed it instantly, wrapping herself up like it was a life raft. When she finally spoke again, her voice was quieter, still mortified, but steadier. Okay, you can turn around now. He did. Her hair was wild, face flushed, eyes still glowing faintly with leftover adrenaline. She clutched the coat tight, shoulders hunched, like armor. Then she noticed it, the look on his face. Not shocked, not flustered, amused. Her eyes narrowed. Why are you smiling like that? A beat. Did you see everything? Ethan didn't bother lying. He nodded once. Even in the darkness, his eyesight was sharp enough to see everything clearly. Yeah. Enid froze. Her ears went red first, then her cheeks, then very quickly everything else followed. She choked, clutching the coat tighter around herself, shoulders hunching like she could physically shrink out of existence. You weren't supposed to admit that. Ethan tilted his head, genuinely confused. You asked. He hadn't meant it unkindly, just factual. Honesty was usually the safest option. Usually. Enid huffed, still clutching the coat like a lifeline. Okay, fine. Table that trauma for later. We have a bigger problem. Her expression shifted, excitement draining into urgency. I saw something running toward Nevermore. Big, clawed, exactly like the monster in Wednesday's drawings. Ethan's smile vanished. Oh, he muttered. The realization hit a second later. Tyler. He straightened, already scanning the tree line in the direction of the school. I forgot about that part. It seemed Laurel had another plan, and Tyler heading to Nevermore was not a good sign at all. Enid followed his gaze. Smoke glowed faintly against the sky, drifting above the forest canopy. You go that way, Ethan said quickly, pointing. Follow the smoke. Wednesday and Weems are there. And you? Enid asked. Ethan's eyes sharpened. I'll handle the problem. At the same time, at Nevermore, the quad had erupted into chaos. Students scattered in every direction, screams cutting through the night as a massive shape tore across the grounds. Claws ripped into stone and grass alike, leaving deep gouges in its wake. Benches splintered. Lanterns shattered. Shadows leapt wildly as the monster barreled through the center of campus. Tyler roared, a sound that didn't belong to anything human. Outcasts ran without understanding, fear overtaking instinct. This wasn't a prank. This was a full-blown attack, and it had just begun. A/N, the Patreon version is already updated to chapter 107, so if you'd like to read ahead of the public release schedule, you can join my Patreon.
Hi guys. I made a paid service in Telegram where you will find a great collection of fanfiction audiobooks organized and regularly updated. What you get? An unlimited access to the full audiobook library. New fanfiction audiobooks added regularly. You can play audios directly from Telegram anytime. Joining our service is available through a monthly subscription of $5. You can pay using PayPal or Ko-fi. So what are you waiting for? Send me a message on Telegram or Discord. I will provide the payment details. After the payment is confirmed, you will receive access to the private Telegram channel containing all audiobooks. If you enjoy fanfiction and prefer listening instead of reading, this library is made for you. Message me anytime to join.